Are you subscribed yet? Just hit the button above so you don't miss a single free audiobook, and leave a comment below now. Decreed. He couldn't remember how he got there. He woke up in a hospital, tubes connected to every part of him. He could hear the steady beep, beep, beep his heart made on the monitor. He kept his eyes closed and listened for sound. The EKG told him he was in a hospital, so he sought out voices. English. People were speaking English in the hall outside of his door. America. His chest hurt, and he remembered being shot. A nurse bustled in and grabbed his chart. "We've been waiting for you to wake up," she said as she scribbled on the clipboard. He cracked open an eye and winced at the light through the window. He was in a double room, but the other bed was empty. He was right. Tubes were everywhere, even his throat. He fought back a gag reflex. "Let me get that," she said, and helped remove it. He coughed, and she held up a small glass of water with a straw. "Your throat is going to hurt for a while," she said. "You've been intubated for about 2 weeks." He tried to move his legs and arms, test the muscles. His left wrist was handcuffed to the bed. The nurse heard it jingle. "Yeah, the police want to talk to you. They have to with every gunshot victim we get. Do you remember what happened to you?" He shook his head. But he did. Veronica. Ron pulled a con to get him back to America, and pulled a trigger in the desert outside of San Diego. He liked her too, which made the con even easier. Now he would have to find her and repay the favor. "I have to call San Diego PD. You just rest. They should be here in a couple of hours." She pushed the call button into his right hand. "Call if you need anything. The doctor will stop by on his rounds, and when he clears you, we can get you some food." His stomach rumbled as if it hurt her. She smiled and patted his arm. He pointed at the water and motioned to his mouth. She leaned in so he could sip down a whole cup again. While she was distracted, he lifted a pen from her pocket and nodded as she left. He couldn't hang around for cops. He wasn't wanted in the U.S., but they would ask a lot of questions. He didn't want to answer them. He began a series of tensing and releasing muscles, starting with his toes. It was something he had learned a long time ago, a meditative practice. He hadn't been in the States in over a decade, so he wouldn't have any contacts here. Getting around was going to be difficult. Still, it was what he was trained to do, just like the recovery meditation. He couldn't worry about it, just solve the problems as they happened. That was the simplest way to approach any obstacle, especially if the odds seemed overwhelming. Break it down into steps, solve the first step, move on. Once you solve enough steps, the obstacle is gone. He needed to get out of the hospital, figure out where he was, and find food and shelter. First problem, get out of bed. He dropped the call button and screwed the top off the pen. He picked the handcuff lock and slid his wrist free. Then he started pulling tubes, taking his time to make sure nothing was too vital or leaked too much as he slid them free. A few drops of blood from the vein, and painful drips of urine from the catheter. He pulled himself up in bed, fought the dizziness, and reached out to turn off the alarm on the heart monitor. Brill rolled his legs out of bed and struggled to stand. It took a minute to remember how to balance, as the pins and needles attacked. He stood rock still as his muscles cramped and screamed, and ignored the pain. He took a tentative step, then another, holding on to the edge of the bed with his hand. His chest ached from the bullet wound, and nausea washed over him. He breathed through his nose, out through his mouth, and willed the pain away. He dragged the cart with him as he checked the small closet. There was a bag with his fake ID and no cash in it, but his clothes were gone. All he had was the hospital gown. Brill limped over to the door and peeked through. The hospital corridor wasn't very busy, and he couldn't discern a pattern with the nurses as they moved from the station to check-in rooms. There were 3 of them, plus the nurse who had checked on him. He waited until the station was empty and they were occupied with a patient, and started out into the hall. The EKG cart hauled him short. It was plugged into the wall. He held a breath and yanked the leads off his chest. If the alarm went off, the nurses could force him back into the bed and restrain him until the cops showed up. The alarm didn't go off on his monitor, though a beeping began at the nurse's station. He rolled the machine back into his room with a shove. He didn't have time to waste. He ambled down the hall, one hand trailing along the wall until he hit a corner and turned into another corridor. He spied the stairway exit and hit the door. He went down one floor and glanced out into the hallway. He didn't know the layout, but he needed to find clothes and a way out before the nurses raised too much of an alarm. He needed a distraction. A fire alarm would do nicely, but he couldn't see one on the wall. No doubt he wasn't the first patient with a penchant for mayhem. He moved up the hallway, getting a little bit faster with each step. He was still weak, and his stomach cramped, reminding him he had lived on glucose for a few weeks. He needed food. He glanced into the first room he found. There was a man sleeping in the bed, hooked up to an EKG machine just as he had been. Brill padded over to his bed. There was an emergency button on the wall for codes. Brill slammed his hand into them all, grabbed the leads off the man, and hurried back into the hall. Alarms were beeping in the room and at the nurse's station. He watched a group of nurses and a doctor run down the hall and into the room. He limped down the corridor as fast as he could. There was a doctor's lounge sign down one hall. He bumped the door open slowly. It was empty. He grabbed a pair of scrub pants off the shelf and shimmied into them, and a scrub top. There were still no shoes, and bare feet would attract attention, but he would deal with that later. He pawed through the lockers, stopping to yank on a couple of padlocks. One was partially closed and popped open. He tore through the locker and found a wallet. He lifted the cash and a credit card, and held the shoes up to the bottom of his feet. No luck. He put the lock back on the locker and clicked it closed. Brill still had to get out of the hospital, and the nurses would have noticed him gone by now. He wasn't sure of the lockdown protocol, but the place was sure to have security, and he didn't want to kill anyone in his escape if he could avoid it. He moved into the hallway and marched down to the stairwell on the opposite end of the building. Moving still hurt, but he was used to pain. He took the stairs slowly, gripping the rail for balance. He made it to the bottom and shoved open the fire door. The alarm let everyone know someone left by that door. By the time security investigated, all they found was an empty alleyway. Chapter 2. First things first. That was the philosophy he was taught so many years ago. He was wounded. He needed a place to hide, a place to rest and heal. And he needed to stay off radar to do it. In Africa, he could find a fixer, and in Europe the ghettos were full of refugees that had been medically trained in their home country, but couldn't get licensed in the Western world. He tried to remember if it was the same in America. He trudged down the street, holding his side with one arm across his stomach, trying to look like a man nursing a hangover instead of bullet wounds. Brill figured that the doctors at the hospital had done the heavy lifting, removed the slugs, stitched veins, and tucked in whatever else was inside of him that needed tucking. What he needed was an EMT or someone who could monitor the healing, at least long enough for him to reach 90%. He'd settle for 80. First things first. Find a doctor. Hospitals were out. Clinics were out. Law required them to report gunshot wounds, and he was sure they would get an APB out on him sometime. That meant changing the way he looked too. Not an easy task, but he took what money he had and trudged into a thrift shop. A pair of pants, a couple of bulky shirts, and a hat later, he limped out looking like a whole new man. If not whole, then a whole man. He grinned and a passerby flinched at the skull-like appearance it gave his emaciated face. Brill nodded to himself. Food. Something warm to keep his core temperature up. Soup. The liquid could keep him hydrated. He spotted a homeless man and followed him. The guy could be on the hunt for a bottle or a meal, but he was walking away from the hospital, and it was as good as any other direction to Brill. They walked for blocks, what felt like miles to his tired feet and underused muscles. The grin came back. He had rucked 80 and 100-pound packs up jungle mountains that hurt less than this slow amble through the concrete canyons. But the bum led him true. Technically, the bum led him to the street and turned right. Brill saw a soup kitchen to the left, a homeless shelter that served up bologna sandwiches, salty generic chips, and styrofoam cups of yellow watery chicken noodle soup. He got in line behind 3 women chatting about different topics to each other, none listening, no one paying attention to him. The line moved quickly. An easy setup. Get a styrofoam plate and plastic spoon. A guy behind a table slapped a sandwich on the plate with one hand and a scoop of chips with the other. Both hands had sterile gloves like the ones surgeons used. At least he wouldn't need a tetanus shot. The grin came back. He felt like he was grinning a lot, scaring a lot of people. But damn it, he was alive. Some woman shot him twice and left him for the birds in the desert, and he lived again. They had a saying back when he worked for XO in South Africa. Any day you wake up is a good way to start. He was awake, he was free, and now he had food. The soup was ladled into a cup by a white-haired man with kindly features. He wore a priest's collar and a benevolent smile. Hold on, he said, and ladled in a second helping. You look like you could use it. Thanks, Brill rasped. The first words he spoke since waking, and it was an expression of gratitude. More grinning, as he shuffled to a table in the corner and sat with his back to the wall. The gunslinger's seat, they called it, but he didn't care today. His focus was on filling his empty stomach with calories and letting his body do some healing. He ripped the sandwich into sections and dipped it into the soup, making the hard bread easier to chew. The chips were split into tiny pieces and turned into floating croutons that swelled up with the liquid and went down smooth as he drained the cup. The white-haired man approached with a pitcher of water and a plastic cup. He set it on the table and poured it for Brill. I wish we could offer you more, said the priest. It was enough. Brill patted his flat stomach and felt his ribs poking out through his skin. I'm Father Claremont, the man introduced himself. I haven't seen you here before. Passing through, Brill rasped. As are many. Claremont sat across from him. May I pray for you? I don't know that it would do any good. Claremont nodded. A lot of people feel like that, but just this morning, I asked the Lord to let me help someone new today, and here you are. Brill snickered. That's a house bet, Father. The priest smiled. Probably so, he glanced around the room. But there are so many that need it. If my prayers can help them in even a small way, then what harm is there in them? Okay, said Brill. He didn't bow his head, as the priest clasped his hands in front of his face and closed his eyes in concentration. His lips moved as he recited the Lord's Prayer and added a supplication to help the man in front of him and guide all those around them. Brill had been raised in the church, the Baptist arm of it, in true Southern style. But once out in the world and learning of all the wonders of a dozen different religions, he felt he could take or leave it. That's what most people did anyway. Take what they wanted and left the rest. But he wasn't sure anyone had prayed for him since his grandmother passed away. Certainly not to his face, and not for him where he could see. It was a kindness, and he vowed to repay it somehow. Amen, Claremont finished and stood. Thanks, Brill said for a second time. I hold service at St. Mark's on Lincoln, Claremont told him. We don't overnight there, but I open the doors all day if you want some shade sometime. Brill watched the priest attend to some of the others in the room and rested at the table. The full belly, the escape from the hospital, and the aches of his wounds made him sleepy. He didn't have time for that yet, but he could rest and plan out the next step. The men and women around him shuffled out in singles and pairs, back into the street to do what the homeless do. He noted a lot of mental illness, a lot of twitching and sniffing associated with drugs, and a lot of third-world behavior. That was what he was most familiar with. Watching people, learning about them, and finding ways to kill them. He had been good at it once. Or damn lucky, which he would take. A skinny Latino kid shifted from foot to foot, brown pants slung below his buttocks, so his tight white underwear showed across his glutes. He noticed Brill staring and glanced away, then tried to sneak over in an obvious way. "You looking to score?" The boy scratched his nose as if he were trying to hide his lips to keep prying eyes from watching. His two front pockets bulged with something. Product, thought Brill. And a pistol. Maybe cash. He'd seen this guy before. Not him precisely, but his type. Guys like him who preyed on the weak. They were part of the problem. "Yeah," he said, and the kid's eyes lit up. "You got cash?" Brill patted his pocket on his pants and nodded. "Let's go outside," the kid whispered. "If they catch me doing anything in here, I can't come back." Brill pushed up off the table and held on until the room stopped spinning. Then he followed the kid through the door. He saw Claremont watch him and shake his head in sadness. Outside, the kid led him further down the alley. "Keep going," said Brill as he glanced back over his shoulder. There were a couple of guys lounging outside of the door, but this part was empty. When they rounded the corner, it was emptier still. The kid turned around, digging in his pocket. Brill didn't stop moving. He slammed into the kid, punched him in the throat, and kneed him in the groin. When he collapsed to the ground, Brill punted his face and knocked him out. Should kill him, he thought. But that would bring police and questions. Somebody might identify him, and someone could connect the dots. Better to just let it be a mugging. He bent over and almost lost his lunch as pain washed over him. It sent him to a knee, which was fine since he was closer to empty the kid's pockets. Several $100s, a worn .38, and 24 tightly rolled baggies of white powder was his reward, along with a set of keys on a fob. He'd have to hunt for it, but he had cash, a weapon, and a ride, plus a full belly, which he almost lost again standing up. He had to hold onto the wall to keep from pitching over next to the drug dealer. But it passed as he knew it would, and he hobbled out of the alley. Brill found the car by pressing the unlock button and listening for the beep. It was a beat-up sedan, dropped low and polished to perfection. The interior reeked like a Jamaican bar, but the tank was full. He turned down the volume on the cranked-up radio and cruised away from the neighborhood. It was time for a new hunt, and he knew just where to start. Chapter 3. "You know how it works around here," the young doctor gave Brill a tired smile. "Ass, gas, or grassman." Brill flexed his fist. The doc had bandaged his wounds and given him a month's worth of antibiotics. The black market physician scored his meds from a Tijuana pharmacy, but they would work. Now it was time to pay the piper. "I'm just kidding," the doc grinned. His name was Randy, a simple introduction, and Brill was glad he didn't refer to himself as Doc, or Dr. Randy, or even a last name. The medicine man probably figured last names was a good way to get found in a bad business. He had a simple face, curly hair, and red blood veins busted in his nose. The doc liked his drink. Track marks in his elbows said he liked something else too. A good way to get in debt with some bad guys, which is how Brill found him. Not through the bad guys, but the place where bad guys do business. A couple of questions and some $20 bills passed around to homeless guys bought him eyes and ears across the city. It was just a method to zero in on the target, and the last of the cash got him on the road to recovery. Now the doc wanted more. Brill calculated how much force it would take to kill him, and how much effort to make it look like an accident. The needles were there, so an OD wasn't out of the question. He almost decided on a course of action when the doc said something interesting. "The guys I work for could use your skill set." Brill's eyes narrowed. "What skill set?" The doc dropped his gaze and flushed as he got flustered. "Look, man," his twitching hand rubbed the back of his neck. "You've been shot. It's not the first time. Tortured too, it looks like. Stabbed. You're lucky. Any one of them could have killed you. I play rough. Yeah, I get that. But the thing is, damage like that, it comes from a certain lifestyle. Plus, every time you take your shirt off, you've got a gun. It's a dangerous neighborhood," said Brill. "Yeah," the doc locked eyes with him. "Probably more so when you're in it." He couldn't hold the gaze of the flat black eyes, and looked away. Brill snorted. "If I've got the skill set you think I do, it would be a bad idea to talk like that." The door behind the doc opened, and two men stepped through. Brill didn't have time to go for his pistol. They both had guns drawn, aimed at where he sat on the butcher block that did double duty as an exam table. They had a skill set too. The shorter one broke right and moved to one corner, giving him a different angle. If Brill did reach his gun, it would buy one of the two an extra second to shoot back. Smart. The two men didn't take his weapon though, which meant they were here to negotiate, not kill him. "The doctor can say what he likes," said the shorter man. He had thick brown hair, a face that would pass for handsome in a different life. Thick shoulders, thick chest, blocky stomach. He looked square to Brill, solid, a body built in a gym. Scarred fists curled around a Glock 19, the barrel scratched and scuffed, like the tips of his shoes and the knees of his pants. Everything slightly worn, enough to work but not pass muster. Brill knew speaking first in a negotiation was the first step to losing. Sometimes speaking second was the next step. So he held his tongue and watched them. "You can put your shirt on," the second man said as the silence stretched out over 60 seconds. Brill picked up the thrift store flannel and set it on his shoulders with one hand. He slipped his right hand through first, then his left, keeping one free to go for the pistol at his waist if needed. The second man watched him carefully, appraising. "You were right," he said to the doctor. "Give us the room." The young man left without another word. The second man leaned against the wall. He was taller than Brill, lighter hair, lean. He had heavy-lidded eyes that gave him a look of perpetual boredom, and thin hands that gripped the pistol stock with easy familiarity. "Those are some nasty scars," he said. "I'm Klein." "Jack," the other offered. "He works for you." Brill indicated the doctor. Klein shrugged. "We all work for the same people." "The same people you work for." Jack stared at him with wide eyes, pupils dilated, hands trembling. "The price for service," Brill guessed. Klein nodded. "The doctor ran up quite a bill on you," Jack smiled. "It's going to take some hard work to pay it off." Brill figured they were hired muscle from some low or mid-level gang, but he needed more intel to figure it out. He'd run across different variations of the same thing overseas. They all operated on the same principle. Screw everybody over. It was a matter of time before they tried to do the same to him. He'd just have to go along with it and get out before they did. "He did a good job," Brill said. "Guess it's fair he gets paid for it." Klein nodded. "You get it. I get it." "This isn't leg breaking," Jack said. "We do the heavy lifting." "You think I'm that strong?" Klein nodded again. "I think you've done it before. Maybe more than once. You can do it for us." It was Brill's turn to nod. Killing them now would be hard. They were expecting it, waiting for the reaction. If he moved too fast or in the wrong direction, the twitchy one would start shooting. He was more worried about the tall man, Klein. He had the look. Possibly the same look Brill had. He didn't enjoy killing. It was just something he was good at doing. Better to go with the flow and get loose. Get some space to maneuver. Then he could figure out the angle. "All right," said Brill. "All right. I need the money." That part was true. Finding the woman who left him here would take cash. Getting to DC to kill the man who hired her would take more. LA had 13 million people in the Metroplex. Dozens of gangs vying for power, and even more opportunities to make cash. Part of the human condition. Somebody somewhere always wanted someone else dead and didn't want to do the deed. "We just said you were paying the doctor back," Jack snorted. "Living expenses," said Brill. "And LA isn't cheap." Klein nodded. "We do everything by contract here. LA isn't cheap and it's litigious." "You make them sign it," said Jack. Brill eased off the table, making sure both hands were far away from his waist. Jack flinched. Klein did not. "That hold up in court?" "It's binding," said Klein. "Makes them feel better about what we do." "What we do," Brill agreed. "Come on, we'll show you." Chapter 4. The office building was lonely after 5 p.m. Mr. Horatio Thomas, Esquire, strutted through the empty halls like he owned the place. He did. He owned the building and the business that occupied the 40th floor, that commanded expansive views of the valley and mountains beyond. If he were just a little bit richer, or if the building was a little bit taller, he could command views of the city skyline on the other side of the range. Still, he was content with his lot in life. Millionaire. Playboy, at least in his own mind. He wore $3,000 suits matched with $300 manicures. He locked up the office and took an express elevator to the parking garage. His Mercedes was parked near the front in a handicapped space, even though he didn't have a sticker. The space may be required by law, but since the garage belonged to him, he wanted the premium spot. He cracked open the door and slid into the driver's seat and began rolling through the empty garage. A silenced .22 barrel pressed against the back of his head. "Keep driving," said Brill. Thomas squealed and jerked the wheel a little before regaining control. "Jesus Christ." "Good guess," said Brill in a low voice. "Wrong, but good. You'll meet him soon enough." Brill directed Thomas onto the freeway and they raced for the desert. "I can pay more," Thomas said as he glanced into the rearview mirror. The gun barrel didn't waver. "How do you know I'm not a robber?" "Are you? Did you know I was coming? I had my secretary hire a security team today." "Who?" "Dawson's," Thomas answered. The man behind him was in shadows. Even the headlights of the cars that passed by them across the interstate only washed across his lower jaw, revealing little. In the absence of information, Thomas's brain was going into overdrive with scary imagery. "Good outfit," said Brill. "I know some of their guys. Would they have stopped you?" A smile flashed in a wash of headlights. "Why did you hire security?" "Allie," said Thomas. "She said she was going to kill me." "You believed her?" "She had her father killed." "You shouldn't mess around with that type of woman." Brill pressed the barrel of the pistol a little deeper into the back of his head. "Shouldn't get them pregnant and violently break off the relationship either. Shouldn't hit them and cause a miscarriage." Thomas whimpered. Brill set a notebook on his leg and flipped it open with one hand. Horatio Thomas, sometimes known as Henry, founder and CEO, Tomatech, never married. Undergraduate degree purchased online, 1997. Master's degree mysteriously appeared in 1998, with no university record of you. Thomas interrupted. 6 one-night stands last year, 4 serious girlfriends. Brill ignored him and continued. 3 anonymous trips to the hospital for facial contusions, broken bones and injuries, consistent with physical abuse among the 10 of them. Any of this sound familiar? If you have that, then you know I can pay more. Thomas glanced into the mirror again. It's not the money, Henry, said Brill. It's the contract. They approached a rest area sign. Pull in here, Brill instructed. Thomas engaged the blinker and pulled into the rest area. Brill directed him to a parking space in front of a picnic structure on an outlying edge of the parking lot. Please, Thomas begged. I can pay. How much? Brill asked. Thomas fumbled for his wallet, drops 3 crisp $100 bills over his shoulder. I have $17,000 in my bank account, he said. I could liquidate 30 more by noon tomorrow. Give me your wallet. Thomas held it back. Brill took it, opened it up. There were 5 more bills still in the crease. You're holding out on me, Henry, he chided. I'm sorry, okay, Thomas fumbled. I'm nervous. What's your bank PIN? What? I know you speak English, Horatio. Tell me your bank PIN. 450,450. If you're lying, I'm coming back for you. 450,450, man, Thomas sighed. I swear. Brill pulled the barrel of the pistol back and watched the tension in Thomas's shoulders relax. He pulled the trigger. The driver slumped against the window. Brill reached up and pulled him back into the headrest and adjusted the seat so it leaned back. He double-checked his reflection in the mirror. There was blowback on his hand. He could feel the droplets of blood, but he couldn't see any on his face. Brill stuffed the wallet in his pocket and climbed out the back seat, careful to slide the gun into his waist before anyone could make out what the object was. He glanced around the empty parking lot. There were few people to observe. Inside the car, Thomas looked like he was sleeping. The ruse might buy a day, maybe 2. Brill ambled across the parking lot and into the men's room. He washed his face with soap and water for a full minute, scrubbing to remove any visible drops of blood on the skin. He checked his jacket sleeves and his face, just to be sure. The metal silver plate that passed for a mirror offered a distorted reflection, but he looked clean. The face looked tired. A couple of months hunting the streets of L.A. could do that. He wore plain clothes with planned features that made him completely forgettable, which was by design. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a wadded-up backpack. He jammed toilet paper into the pack to make it appear full, and felt a little sorry for the next trucker who needed to make a deposit in the bowl. The man was going to be very sorry and very angry because it took almost all the paper to get the look Brill wanted. He slung the backpack on his shoulders and marched across the parking lot to the freeway. He had to wait for a break in the traffic, but he jogged over to the shoulder on the far side of the road and began running back toward town. It didn't take long. Even though hitchhiking wasn't the safest method of travel, he found that if you jogged in military cadence and made forward progress toward the destination, someone was bound to pull over. They would have questions, and he had a story as cover which included information about moving across the country. No one would connect him with the body discovered days later, and even if they did, all a driver could describe was an average guy with a name that turned out fake. The PIN code worked. Brill cleaned out as much as he could from the ATM, keeping his hat low. He wore sunglasses and puffed out his cheeks with air to distort his features. He figured he could visit 4 more ATMs scattered around the city before triggering an alarm. So he rode the bus out to Santa Monica and hit the tourist spots. They were high traffic and might trick the bank into thinking that Thomas was on a shopping spree. He was right. He hit an ATM in Santa Monica, made his way to Venice for the second, then Marina del Rey for number 3. He jogged down the bike path toward Manhattan Beach for number 4, and capped off 5 and 6 in Redondo Beach. No alarms were triggered, and the ATMs gave the card back each time. He upped the limit at each machine, and it responded. At the end of the day, he had $3,800 in hand. Add that to the $10,000 he earned for the contract, and it was turning out to be a good haul. Not as good as the money he earned before he died in the desert outside of San Diego, but getting there. He pocketed the card and turned around to run back up the bike path. He had a place to visit before sunset. Running wasn't his only salvation. Chapter 5. "Forgive me, Father," Brill said into the grate inside the confessional booth. "You're not Catholic." Claremont stood up and swished aside the curtain to step out. "I'll be just a moment," he said to the 3 senior citizens standing in line. Claremont wasn't sure what they needed confession, but he was sure God would forgive their small transgressions for having lived so long. The man who stepped out of the booth and followed him, he wasn't so sure about. "I pray for you every night," Claremont told him as he stepped in line with the priest. "I could use it. I'm supposed to go to the authorities with this." Brill kept pace as they walked toward the priest's office. He wasn't sure why he kept coming back to the man who fed him the first day out of the hospital, but their acquaintance had evolved into weekly visits. Not for confession. Brill wasn't sure the priest could handle that intel. But the man was insightful, and perhaps read something in the black eyes of the hard man who visited him, and decided to work on his soul. "He deserved it," said Brill. They all did. The priest was right. He should have turned Brill in. Not that it would have done anyone any good. Brill had no problem breaking or hurting boys in blue to get free. Had no qualms about dying to do so. He was a child of God, Claremont said as they entered his office. He poured a cup of tea for Brill, and one for himself, as they sat on the battered second-hand sofa that had seen thousands of counseling sessions. A couple of those conversations had been with Brill. He knocked up a daughter of God, and then beat the shit out of her to kill the baby. Almost killed her too. "Say 12 Hail Marys for cursing," Claremont admonished. "I would if I knew them." The priest sipped his tea. "I wish you would stop the killing," he said over the rim of his cup. "If I don't, someone else will." "It's wrong." Brill shrugged. It was an old debate, one settled long ago for him. Man killed as far back as history recorded it, and he would make a large bet that it happened even before then. He wasn't a religious man, not by a far cry, but he had read parts of the Bible. Cain and Abel weren't the first recorded murders in history, but everyone knew the story. There were countless others in each culture, and all for reason. Everyone justified their actions. Even the hitman. He only hurt people who hurt others. That he did it for money meant a small measure of peace that allowed him to sleep better at night. But some idealists like Claremont believed violence was a means, not the end. "I guess that depends on which side of the line you're on," Brill told him. For the girl he almost destroyed, it was righting a wrong. Claremont shook his head. They had this conversation before, and much like some parishioners who came to him with inconsistencies in the Bible they allowed to shake their faith, he knew it was a matter of belief. He believed the man sitting across from him was a good man, who did bad things in the name of good. He could cite hundreds of priests who did the same in the history of his church, and the one thing he couldn't stand, the one reason he didn't turn Brill in, was the hypocrisy of it. The church existed to do good, to save people, and to bring them closer to God. It did not exist to admonish those who did the same thing the church did. Claremont knew the church had killed before, and no PR campaign would change that fact. He would not condemn Brill for the same, even if he thought it was wrong. But that didn't prevent him from trying to stop him through conversation. Brill finished his tea and put $300 on the table. "That is an expensive cup of tea," Claremont joked. But he appreciated the gesture. Brill gave him money to buy food to feed the needy. The priest wondered if that played a part in his reticence to keep silent about the evil deeds done by his friend. Or if friendship played a role. Or even fear. He had looked into the cold black eyes of the man in front of him, and was afraid. "I'll try to bring more," said Brill. He shook Claremont's hand and left with that promise. Chapter 6. Brill left the cathedral and paused at the top of the stairs. He spied Klein's car across the road, parked in the narrow shade of a palm tree. The man motioned him over. Jack sat in the passenger seat and watched as Brill approached. "A man in our profession shouldn't follow a routine," said Klein. Jack leaned over, so he could peer out of the driver's window. "Church every time you do a job. Not so smart." "You got a job for me?" Brill asked. "No chit-chat for us?" Jack smirked. "You were in there talking to someone else long enough." Brill just stared at them. "We came to ask a professional courtesy," said Klein. "Get in." Brill opened the back door and slid into the plush seats. He palmed his pistol and held it in his lap as the car started up and pulled out into traffic. He was sure the two men up front had their guns out as well. "Just in case." "We do those?" he asked. "From time to time," Klein explained. "And this is one of those times. We have an opportunity to make a move in this market," Jack explained. "And we don't want to get in each other's way. We want you to lay low for a while." "What's in it for me?" Brill asked. "We're going half for each." "I can make that in 3 months." "But you haven't." "No one has. It's a seller's market and hoods are cheap. They'll kill anybody, and you almost don't have to pay them." "We hear about you, you know," said Jack. "This would be an opportunity for you to take a vacation, catch up on your reading." Brill sat on the edge of the seat, his hand resting under the lapel of his coat. He considered their words, considered pulling out the pistol and painting the windshield with the insides of their heads. He glanced out of the window. People walked past on the sidewalk, oblivious to his thoughts. "Are you bringing anyone in on it?" "Cheap thugs," grunted Jack. "Labor costs cut into profits." "I have one more job tonight." Klein watched him from the side of his eyes. Brill could tell what he was thinking. His hand was under his lumpy coat, too. He briefly wondered who was faster, but Klein smiled. "After that, you take a year off. We don't want anyone dead." The meaning was obvious. "I've got books I'd like to read," Brill nodded. "Let me out here." Jack pulled over to the curb, and Brill spilled out of the back door. "Remember," Jack said. "Tonight, and that's it. We won't be lenient." Brill nudged the door closed with his knee and slipped quietly into the crowd. "Think he bought it?" "He'll do it." Klein watched him disappear around the corner. "We won't see him again." Who's next? Chapter 7. LA at night is a weird city. The streets are home to degenerates and tourists, drug addicts and aspiring actors, all conspiring in a noisy, busy dance that ebbs and flows from the beach to the mountain like the tide in the bay. Skyscrapers dot the landscape like forts in the Old West, shored up against random intrusions by the denizens of the city, guarded by uniformed men armed with pepper spray. One in particular had the distinction of 2 security guards that spoke of the important things that went on behind its closed glass doors. One security guard sat at a terminal and watched television on a computer screen. The other marched around the perimeter of the lobby before joining his partner to laugh at a cartoon. Upstairs behind a second set of locked doors and down a darkened hallway, Harvey Nichols sat at his desk. Sweat dripped down his fat cheeks and he mopped his bald head, beady eyes flitting in fear. Brill sat across from him, an open manila folder on his lap. "Harvey. Harvey. Harvey. This is where you tell me you have money." "I have money." Harvey smacked his fleshy lips. "Lots of money." "They have more, Harvey." "Who?" he whimpered. "Does it matter? The list looks long. This is some heavy reading, Harvey." "I'll disappear." "Please. Don't do this. You getting gone is sort of the whole point," don't you think, Harvey?" Harvey shoved his chair back from his desk and bolted for the door. Brill leaped out of his chair, landed, and grabbed Harvey by the collar. A simple Aikido move redirected the obese man's momentum toward the window. He tried to backpedal and stop, but Brill kept pushing his back and neck. Harvey crashed through the window and screamed. It ended with a wet plop on the sidewalk in front of the lobby. Chapter 8. The park was crowded on the sunny, 70-degree afternoon. The street vendors were out in force, hawking their wares to park-goers, shouting over the laughter of scampering children. Brill sat on a bench alone and nursed a bowl of ice cream. He indicated people slightly with his spoon as they passed his vision. Male early 30s, desk job. 30 seconds. Male 20s, football or rugby. 45 seconds. Female with child, off limits. Male 50s, athletic. 20 seconds. The people avoided him, but whether it was the muttering or the general aura of menace he gave off, he couldn't be sure. Luckily, he was content with the solitude, even among the crowds. He couldn't imagine it any other way. Brill stood in the center of an open space in his apartment. The television was dark, the radio was silent. He closed his eyes and slowly moved through a series of kata. He finished and moved to the bathroom. Next to the shower was a cedar-paneled sauna. He checked the temperature gauge, which read, a toasty 120 degrees. Brill dropped his shorts and stepped into the sauna. He sat on the worn plank seat, and sweat popped out to dot his forehead. He closed his eyes and meditated, using a box breathing method with 4 counts in, 4 counts held, 4 counts to blow out, and 4 counts held again. After 40 minutes, he exited, showered, and lay down to sleep. Chapter 9. The next morning, he dressed in his suit, no tie, and left his building to hail a cab. His loft apartment was at the edge of a bad neighborhood downtown, going through a rough gentrification process. This kept the rents lower, which wasn't a priority for him, and the privacy high, which was. He directed the cab to a diner in Burbank and asked to be dropped off 2 blocks away, so he could observe the surroundings first. Even though he knew the man he was meeting, he was still careful. In his line of work, money was the ultimate BFF. Rick Tabak sat in a corner booth, his back to the door. The seat across from him was against the wall, and even though he looked like he wanted to be sitting there, he knew the man he was going to meet would choose that seat. It was a courtesy he was happy to extend. He shoveled 4 heaping spoons of sugar into his coffee cup, swirled it around, and poured creamer into the miniature vortex. Brill crept up on Cat's feet and tapped him on the shoulder. "Jesus Christ, you scared the bejesus out of me." Brill slid into the open seat and motioned for a cup of coffee from the tired waitress. "Did you bring the money?" Tabak pulled a thick, crumpled envelope out of his pants pocket and slid it across the table. Brill reached out and slid it into his coat pocket. "Did you do what I told you?" Tabak unfolded a piece of paper. "Name, address, job, everything you asked. Let's go for a ride." He hopped up. Tabak jumped, spilled coffee on the laminate tabletop. "Leave a tip," Brill advised. Tabak dropped a $20 bill on the table and followed Brill outside. "We'll take your car." Chapter 10. The drive up Pacific Coast Highway was made famous in a couple of hundred movies. The scenic interlude bathed in setting sunlight was a far cry from the traffic-jammed mess that clogged the artery for most hours of the day and night. Tabak and Brill made it past the jam and pushed out toward Malibu. They drove by a sign that said Will Rogers State Park, and Brill motioned them into the parking lot. "What are we doing?" Brill hopped out of the car and started walking across the sand toward the water. Tabak slid into a parking spot and rushed after. "Take your shirt off," Brill said as the wheezing man caught up with him. "Excuse me?" "Take off your shirt." Tabak glanced over his shoulder to the car and thought for a moment about making the dash for it. "I did everything you asked," he sputtered. "Are you going to kill my wife? Does she deserve to die?" Tabak let his eyes wander over the beach. It was deserted around them. "The bitch cheated on me. You have a broken heart. Are you going to kill her or what?" said Tabak with bravado. Brill reached around to the small of his back and pulled out a .22. He rested it against the side of his leg. "Take off your shirt, please." Tabak slowly unbuttoned his shirt and dropped it in the sand. He wore a stained white undershirt underneath, with the telltale outline of a wire taped to his chest. "You should have a doctor take a look at that," offered Brill. "A growth like that could kill you." Tabak watched the road, but no one pulled in. He was alone, and probably out of range of the receiver. The traffic jam, the quick trip up the coast, all of it designed to remove him from the range of his watchers. He flinched as Brill leaned down to speak directly into the microphone. "Stop looking for hitmen. Kill for hire is against the law. It's against the law for you to even ask. You don't want to go to jail. Or worse." He reached out and took the keys to Tabak's car from his hand and left him standing in the sand. Chapter 11. Crusty sunlight leaked through ancient windows in a tiny crowded diner. The patrons were a little more blue-collar in this neighborhood, finishing up third shift or getting ready to start second shift work. The tables were covered with decades of grit and grime no amount of elbow grease could remove. But it was noisy, in the kind of noise that gave you privacy. Bill used it more than once. He sat in the back with his back to the wall. Retired waitress walked by and refilled his coffee cup. "Sugar." "Just the coffee." The waitress turned back into the busy room. "Big tip," she sighed under her breath. Brill watched her walk past the door. He noted a middle-aged man slip in quietly. He looked around the room nervously, his eyes finally settled on Brill. The man tiptoed his way across the floor and slid into the booth across from him. "I'm Willis. I thought you would pick someplace less populated." "This is less obvious," said Brill. "Want some coffee?" Willis shook his head. Brill pulled a folded piece of paper out of his jacket and slid it across the table. Willis picked it up with trembling fingers. "What if someone overhears us? They can't read the paper." Willis, his eyes darted across the paper. "It's like a contract," he said. "I don't work without one," said Brill. "It doesn't say what you're going to do." Brill picked up his coffee and took a long sip. He eyed Willis over the edge of the cup. "Did this guy do what you said he did?" Willis crumpled the paper in his hand, knuckles popping. "This bastard raped my little girl. And they let him go." "There was no proof as I understand it," said Brill. "He did it. They had to let him go, on a technicality. He broke my baby girl for life, and the cops won't do anything because they screwed up." Brill watched him closely. There were bad people in the world. Hell, he was one of them, probably the worst of them. He knew there was something wrong with the wiring in his brain. He only cared about killing, and he was just smart enough to kill people he considered worse than him. Judge, sure. Jury, why not? The executioner was the fun part. "I'm going to do what I said I'd do." "You're going to kill him," growled Willis. "And make him suffer." "I want him to suffer." "Sign the contract," said Brill. He slid a pen across the Formica tabletop. Willis picked it up and scribbled frantically. "When will you do it?" Brill took the contract and folded it in 3 parts. He slid it into his pocket and held out his hand. Willis passed a thick manila envelope across to him. Brill stood up and dropped a $20 bill on the tabletop. "Just watch the news." He walked through the crowd and left by the door. The waitress swung by the table, pocketed the $20 bill, and stared after Brill as he slipped away. Chapter 12. Brill stood at the edge of a crowded park. He studied a man on a bench on the other side of the playground. The man was long and lean, tall with shaggy hair and alone. His name was Ryan, and he watched the preteen girls play a pickup game of soccer. Brill noticed a woman walking behind him. She's pushing a stroller and making baby noises to the infant inside. He watches her walk to the edge of the lake and turned his attention back to Ryan as the soccer game broke up. Ryan killed the car engine and shifted into neutral. He coasted past the little girl and pulled to the curb 15 feet ahead of her. She still wasn't paying attention, focused on the cracks in the sidewalk and not stepping on them because she didn't want to break her mother's back. Ryan climbed out of the driver's seat, walked around the back of the car, opened the rear passenger door. She was close now, eyes down, lost in her own little world. Ryan watched her lips moving as she sang, oblivious. He reached around her head, covered her mouth, scooped her up and tossed her in the back of the car. He jumped in on top of her and crushed the air from her body. He ripped duct tape from a waiting roll, covered her mouth, swirled it around her hands and feet and ankles. He reached back and shut the rear door, crawled over into the front seat, and started the car. He pulled away from the curb less than 30 seconds from the time he stopped. His home was at the back of a cul-de-sac, the side-load garage affording additional privacy. Ryan hit the clicker on his visor to raise the garage door, pulled in, and waited until it was all the way back down again before he cut the car off. He pulled the little girl out of the back seat, and she began squirming. He grinned as he carried her into his house. A shadow stepped out of the darkness and caused his heart to race in his chest. Then the shadow said his name. Rick Ryan. Ryan dropped the bundle in his hands. The squeal from the little girl made it past the duct tape blocking her mouth. She pawed at it with her bound hands, trying to rip it away from her lips. "How did you get in here?" Ryan challenged. "Why don't you call the police?" the shadow asked. The little girl watched the exchange between the two men and grew silent, wide eyes peering over the loosened edge of duct tape she pushed up on her cheek. "You know I can't do that." Then the man stepped out of the shadows, so that light spilling in from the garage door outlined the razor-sharp edges of his face. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a piece of paper. "Rick Ryan, 35, said Brill. 6 arrests, no convictions. All for child molestation. Trying for 7. Ryan rolled his eyes, taking in the pier and beam ceiling, the white walls and modern decor. All chrome and metal, sterile. He smiled and held up both hands to show Brill they were empty. "What do you want?" "You want some money." "I've got money." "You want her when I'm done?" Ryan leered. Brill took one step further into the light. Ryan saw a coiled rope in his hand. The man tossed it over one of the beams and let a noose dangle near his hand. "I want you to feel bad," said Brill. 2 squad cars squealed to a stop to block the driveway at the end of the cul-de-sac. 4 officers jumped out and pulled their service weapons to approach from the front and the back. The lead officer beat on the front door with his closed fist and screamed, "Police! Open up!" There was no answer. The second officer gave him a nod and pulled this boot back. He planted it next to the doorknob and splintered the wood with a loud crack. The 2 officers rushed in from the front as the 2 officers joined them from the back of the home. They froze at the sight in front of them. Ryan dangled from the end of a rope, his feet 8 inches above the hardwood floors. His purple tongue protruded from his blue face, one hand wedged under the noose, a last-ditch effort to breathe. The little girl stood next to the body, whacking it like a piñata with a baseball bat. Chapter 13. Jack cruised the neon-soaked busy streets. His head was on a swivel as he checked out the selection of hookers, drug addicts, and assorted deadbeats that lined the grimy sidewalks. He spied something that caught his eye and pulled his car over to the curb. The electric window rolled down with a hum. "Want a ride?" Jack asked. A young teenager with too much makeup and too little clothes bent over to give him an eyeful of her cleavage. She chomped on a wad of bubble gum and gave him a million-watt smile. "That's my line," she said with a grin. Jack reached across the passenger seat and popped the door open for her. He eyed her in appreciation as she climbed in, her skirt hiking up to show she was commando underneath. He took her to a two-story ancient structure that referred to itself as a motel off a busy street. He appreciated the pink stucco exterior, last updated 3 decades ago, and the privacy the dingy structure afforded. It was a classic no-tell-motel that rented rooms by the hour, a rare commodity these days in the City of Angels. Jack kept a room on a fake credit card to use whenever the urge hit. Like tonight. He pulled into the empty parking lot and parked facing the door on the end. "Hope this will work," he asked. "As long as you've got cash," she answered. Jack opened the door and let her into the room. He pulled a wad of folded-over $100 bills and set them on the nightstand. "I'm just going to leave that there for you when we are done." Her young eyes grew 3 sizes larger as she stared at more money than she made in a month. It was enough cash that she could ignore a room so grody, even the roaches avoided it. Gray walls with indeterminate stains on them matched a gray floor with even more stains. The sheets were gray, as were the curtains. It affected the mood of the room. The only splash of color was the pleather miniskirt she slipped out of as Jack watched. He kicked off his shoes and shuffled out of his pants, falling backwards over the bed, and let her climb on top of him. She took him in her hand and guided him inside of her. "Do you want dirty talk?" she said in an attempt at a sexy voice. Jack shook his head and concentrated on grinding up into her. He reached up and put a hand on each bicep to hold her. She thought he was guiding, trying to help. His hands kept exploring the skin on her arms and traced the contours of her narrow shoulders. She didn't flinch when he wrapped his thick hands around her neck and began to squeeze. She thrashed back and forth on top of him, but he held her tight, pounding against her as she suffocated. She collapsed on top of him, and he felt her heart stop beating against his chest as he finished inside of her. Spent, he shoved her dead body over the side of the bed and let it flop to the floor in a heap. He bent over and grabbed her hand and began to examine it. Then he moved into the bathroom to wash his own hands in the crusty sink. He stared at the reflection in the mirror and smiled at the man looking back at him. Chapter 14. The next night, he sat in the car across from Klein as they staked out the cathedral. "How was your date last night?" Klein asked. Jack sighed. "It didn't work out." "Sorry about that, man," said Klein. "Don't worry, the right one is out there for you. You just have to keep looking." "Yeah. I'll always have a piece of her with me, though." "In your heart." "In my pocket," Jack grinned. He fished a bleached finger bone out of his pocket and waved it under Klein's nose. The man in the passenger seat snatched it out of his hands. "How the hell do you do that?" "Some acid, some peroxide," said Jack. "And a polyurethane varnish." "Nice work," said Klein as he tossed the bone back to Jack. The two men focused on the cathedral and waited. "There he is." "Still confessing," said Jack. "That means he's got something to talk about." "We can talk to him." Jack showed Klein his gun. "I say we just kill him." Klein nodded. "We could. Or we could get hurt trying." "You got a better idea." "Yeah," Klein dropped the car in gear. "We hit him where it really hurts." "The nuts." "His bank account." "Oh yeah," said Jack. "That's worse." Chapter 15. The halls of the contained treasures of the ages. Priceless paintings lined the walls. Tapestries woven by hands dead for 400 years covered the stones. A portly priest rushed past them all, so familiar with their presence it was easy to ignore them. He stepped into a room full of flickering candles and soft lighting from sconces in the corners. A fire raged in a stone fireplace that took up one wall of the room. It was big enough to throw a man into, and still have room left over. "You're late," said Peter. He was dressed in a gown, and carried a staff that designated him as a bishop. "My apologies, Eminence," said the priest. The fat man huffed, trying to catch his breath after the rush through the compound. "There's no time to waste," Peter snapped. "I didn't take a red-eye from Los Angeles just to wait on you." The priest bowed and scraped, muttering his apologies again. He turned and motioned to a dark corner of the room. A nervous tiny man trembled in the corner. He took a timid step forward and bowed to the priest. "An astronomer," he introduced him to the bishop, "by the name of Giavelli." The astronomer bowed lower than the priest, trying to scrape his nose against the stone floor. "Father," he stammered, "the portents are in the star for a trained eye to find." Bishop Peter turned to the other side of the room and motioned. A second priest stepped into the faint firelight and stared into the flames. "Do you hear?" Peter asked. The man nodded. "Do you understand?" The second man, Rano, knit his furrowed brow and glared at the dancing light. He understood. It was his place to know, his place to understand. "I have studied the prophecies," he said. "I concur," the portly priest offered. "He is here and he must be killed," Peter seethed. "Have you informed His Holiness?" "Not yet," the priest answered. "I am seeking his guidance, but later. We in this room have elected to do this task for him first." "Is this my burden?" Rano turned away from the fire and stared at the bishop, a hint of fear in his eyes. "This is not your duty," he said. "We will put you in touch with another of our order." "And the burden is his," the priest seemed to beg. The bishop ignored him. His mind was focused on getting back to the U.S. and sending information to the man who could get the job done. His hands would be clean, of course. As the leader of the church in the crowded region of Los Angeles, his was more a political than religion's position. Even now, dabbling in prophecy was as much a hobby as influencing politicians to make the church stronger. An ambitious man like himself, a man who could take charge and be responsible for monumental tasks, was the type of man who could be anointed cardinal. From there, it was anyone's guess that no American cardinal had ever been elected pope. But no American cardinal had killed the Antichrist before, he pondered. He stared into the fire and in his mind accepted the papal ring. Once they returned to L.A., he would contact one of his priests, one who spent a lot of time with the homeless and downtrodden. That priest could find a man to do what needed to be done. Eliminate a problem and create an opportunity. That's how the bishop saw it. Chapter 16. Claremont sat behind a massive oak desk buried under stacks of paper, envelopes, and books. The room was a study of organized chaos, each item placed exactly where he can find it so long as no one touched it. There were several Bibles of various vintages scattered around the room, each opened to a specific text. He pawed through the mail of the day and picked up an envelope with a papal seal very prominent in the corner. Claremont reached into the top drawer and removed a brass letter opener. He ran the sharp point under the edge of the envelope and removed a sheet of parchment. It was a single sheet typed in a tight script. His eyes screwed up as he read the contents, and he blew a breath out of his nose. He folded the paper and stuck it in his coat pocket, then moved to the door. He stepped outside of the cathedral into the blinding light of the sun and almost bumped into Brill. "Father, you seem distracted. Were you coming to see me?" "I'm not at confession today," Claremont answered. "I don't have anything to confess today." Brill joined him as they walked down the steps and onto the sidewalk. "Yet. So, your plans include another visit to me. Are you making up for lost time?" "It might seem like that." I wanted to talk to you outside of our normal channels of communication. There's this girl." "A matter of heart," Claremont interrupted him. "I thought you didn't have one." "Having a heart and not using it are different things. For different people. And this girl, does she reciprocate your feelings?" They walked along in silence for a few steps. "I haven't spoken with her," said Brill. "That's what I wanted to see you about. She is making me," he hesitated, "have feelings." "Of the flesh?" "Of the heart," Brill answered. "She doesn't look like she has much, and I know the church helps the needy." Claremont froze on the sidewalk and reached out a hand to stop Brill. "Are you actually feeling benevolence? Are you concerned about your fellow man?" "Fellow woman," Brill corrected. "Man. Woman. It doesn't matter. It means the Lord has heard my prayers." "So you'll help her?" "Of course I will. We will." "Who is she?" "I don't know," Brill shrugged. "But I can find out. You let me know, and I will do what I can for her. I must go now. I have guests from Rome arriving, and I need to prepare." "I'll get the information to you," said Brill. Claremont held out his hand and waited until it became uncomfortable as Brill looked at it. "Joyous wonder," said the priest. "This is joyous." "Not too much," said Brill. "It doesn't mean I've stopped working." "Buildings are built one brick at a time," the priest beamed. Brill watched him walk away, the priest smiling and shaking his head in joy. Chapter 17. The fat man glared at the sweating runners as they jogged past, ignoring him as he sat in the slat wood bench. "Like what you see, bitches," he leered and cradled his crotch with a chubby paw. The women sped up, arcing out to run past him. "Yeah, you know you want it," he yelled after them. Brill stared at him through the parted leaves of a bush, 90 yards away. He had seen men like him before. They hated themselves so much they made it a personal mission to make the rest of the world as miserable as they were. Pulling the trigger was going to be satisfying on this one. He caught wind of a scent, men's cologne growing stronger, and lifted his finger off the trigger. The man was good. He'd gotten in close. Brill let him sneak a few steps closer. "Not gonna happen," Jack said as Brill leaned back. He let his pistol swing around and dangle on his index finger. Jack lowered his weapon but kept it ready, just in case. "You didn't hear me coming." "Smelled you," Brill answered. "1 spritz from now in." Jack lifted his shirt and sniffed it. "I like it. Took it from this cholo trying to sell that swag on a corner." "You get what you pay for," said Brill and started to stand. The pistol didn't move to point directly at him, but it was close. "Slow," Jack advised. "What are you doing here?" Brill rolled his shoulders. "A guy has to eat." "We had an agreement." The barrel of the pistol drifted to aim at him, then away again. Brill got the threat. "I'm still waiting for my cut from the first job," he answered. Jack shifted his stance and glanced away. To the right, Brill noted, not the left. The left was long-term memory. It would mean that Jack was trying to recall the terms of their agreement. The right was creativity. It meant the next words out of his mouth was a fairy tale. "We're planning to pay it all at once," the man said. "Or not at all." Jack grinned and gripped the pistol tighter. "What's the matter? You don't trust me?" Brill lashed out with his foot, kicked the gun in the other man's hand and sending it sailing in the air. He caught it mid-flight and cracked it across Jack's face. "Not even a little," he answered. He heard a commotion and peeked through the bushes. The fat guy was laid out across the jogging trail, a spreading pool of blood leaking from a hole in his head. A crowd started to gather, phones out to take pictures and call 911. Brill saw Klein in the middle of them. He glanced at the bushes and locked eyes with Brill, giving him a tight, "I told you so" smile. "Damn," Brill sighed. He hid his pistol under his shirt and made sure to kick Jack in the stomach as he left. He should probably kill him, he thought. But that might make more trouble than the man was worth. Let them rob him. He'd find a way to make up the cash and get out of town. Chapter 18. Maybe it was the design of the building. Post-World War II, America went through a utilitarian phase. It was the beginning of the moral majority, the birth of television, and the censorship that went along with it. Instead of finding some middle ground, the conservatives in charge took a hard turn to the right, and that attitude carried over into almost every aspect of life, including architecture. Buildings constructed in the 50s were big blocks of industrial brick, uniform straight lines, and zero personality. They took up huge chunks of city real estate and become possessed of a life-sucking force of their own. Jessie considered this as she sat in an office waiting. She had been waiting for 2 hours. Worse than the DMV. But at least the baby was quiet. The man in the office had a cheap short-sleeve dress shirt and a clip-on tie. His mustache was drizzled with gray, a lifer stuck in this red-tape job. She wondered if he made it a personal mission to make everyone as miserable as he was. It says here you made $20,000 last year, his voice was nasally. It matched his beady eyes that glared at her through puffed-up cheeks. He probably thought the look was intimidating. What she felt was more like pity. I did, Tom. She read off the fool's gold-plated name tag pinned to the pocket of his shirt. But I got laid off. Now I don't make any money. Are you at least trying to look for work? She nodded to the quiet infant swaddled in her arms. I try, she shrugged. But I'm not having any luck so far. Tom glared at her some more, and then glared at the thin file in his ink-smudged hands. He flipped through the pages, as if some additional information would present itself even after 10 trips through the 6 pages before. Jessie stared over his shoulder. Another mother in another room sat in front of a large woman with the same look on her face Tom had. Maybe they were trained to look like that. Some seminar they all attended on the taxpayer's dime to learn how to glare, how to stare, and how to drain the energy of any room they entered. Tom dropped the file and rubber-stamped it with a loud thump. Sorry, he said. Sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. You made too much money. Made, she reminded him. Made. I made too much money. I'm not making any money now. That's why I came to you. I need some help. He shrugged. Yes. Well. Sorry. What am I supposed to do? Get a job, he suggested. My baby is a few weeks old. The shrug again. More glaring. She was sure he practiced it in the mirror. Sorry. If you say sorry one more time, I'm going to shove that rubber stamp so far down your throat, you'll pass ink for the next year, she growled. Don't tell me you're sorry. Tell me about another program. You're supposed to help me. Tom smirked. Sorry. Jessie's scream echoed through the office, startling everyone, and left while Tom dialed security. The rotund, huffing guard waddled out of the elevator as she took the stairs. It wasn't easy with a baby in her arms, but she gripped him tight as she descended and wished for a carrier. And a car while she was wishing. She had enough money for food or a bus fare. The food would be cheap ramen noodles, $1 a package, but she could grab 4 to feed her for a couple of days. At least she had formula. The hospital had sent her home with a care package, but she didn't think it could last more than a few more days. Jessie wiped her eyes as she hit the street and started walking. It was tough to fight back the tears. She bit her lip to keep from sobbing in frustration, but that didn't stop the water leaking from the corners of her eyes. She didn't notice the man in a cheap ball cap and aviator shades slip into the sparse crowd behind her as he trailed after. Chapter 19. He followed her into the store. It was one of those shops that sold everything for $1. The cool air inside was a refreshing relief, from the dry desert air that blanked Los Angeles. The Santa Anas hadn't started, the moisture-sucking winds that flowed out of the high desert bringing heat with it. But they were on their way. Brill figured it would blow the smog out to sea, and wondered if that made him more Angelino thinking like that. He watched Jessie wander up and down the aisles. She picked up a green handbasket and held it in one fist gripped so tight he could see the knuckles on her thin hands popping out. She stopped on one of 3 food aisles and counted out 4 packages of cheap noodles into the basket. Then she picked it up and wandered to the baby section. It wasn't much, just 3 shelves and the bare essentials. Brill watched the young woman use her fingernail to slice open a package to pull out 4 diapers and secret them under the baby in one smooth move. Hard to notice unless you were watching. Jessie went to the counter and paid for the noodles. She began to walk out of the door, and Brill saw a worker detach from a corner to stop her. He darted on an intercept course and bounced off the man's shoulder. It sent the clerk into a soda display, knocking over a tower of 2-liter bottles, some exploding in the crash. Brown sugar water erupted in a fountain of foamy bubbles. Brill bent down, scooped up 2, and exited the door before the clerk could get up. Outside, he looked around and found Jessie a half-block away, and stared at one of the bottles in his hand. He rushed after her. "Miss," he called. "I think you dropped this." She jumped at the sound of his voice. Nervous that someone from the store was after her, he bet. He held out the soda and nudged it into her hands. "I didn't," she said. "Just take it then. I've got an extra." He showed her the bottle in his other hand. As soon as she gripped the outstretched offering, he turned and walked away. "Stupid," he cursed. Now she would notice if she saw him again. New hat, new glasses, he planned in his head as he rounded the corner of the block. A small crowd gathered in front of the discount store, the battered clerk moving his hands as he explained to a cop on a bike what happened. Brill spun around and made the corner before they made him. Too much, he thought, and glanced at the wall behind him. He could scale it, but in broad daylight, that might attract even more attention. Why was he bothering with some girl, he wondered. She meant nothing to him. Just another young woman with a baby, no baby daddy, trying to make it in a world set up to destroy them. He had seen thousands in other countries over the years. Hadn't bothered to help them. Why this one? "I'm walking away," he told himself. Time to get gone. But he didn't. He still needed to get cash for his escape. He wanted to go off-grid and off-radar until he figured out his next move. It would be east, and DC was an expensive city. Getting to the man who had him shot wasn't going to be easy. He took a deep breath and spied Jessie further up the road. She hadn't noticed him turning back, which made that way safe. He let his mind start flowing as he started after her again. He called it brainstorming, just jumping from idea to idea, playing out scenarios in his head. Sometimes things would stand out at him, and he could connect dots to make stuff happen. But the image of the hungry girl kept popping in his mind. He'd been hungry before. Days on end without food. Nothing to drink, but jungle water with the metallic chemical taste that made it safe to drink. So what, he thought. Lots of people go hungry. He still followed her, though. She turned into a park and found a bench overlooking a small pond with a fountain in the middle that squirted water into the dry air. Jessie sat on the bench, pulled up her shirt, and began to nurse her baby. Brill watched as she unscrewed the top of the soda and took 2 small, careful sips. Enough for her blood sugar to spike. Enough for a jolt of energy in a tired body. But just enough and no more. She capped it and put the rest in her pocket. Then she smiled. There was no reason for it, he knew. Except the sun on her face, the drink in her pocket, and food in a bag, plus her baby. Simple things, he thought. He'd been there before, too. That was one tough kid, he thought, as he planned to walk away. But he didn't. Every time he saw a couple, it reminded him of a life he missed. He didn't spend much time in contemplation, though regret occasionally snuck its way in during meditation. And when it did, he wondered what he missed, what his life might have been like if he had stayed in the small town he grew up in, or never ventured into a refugee camp in Africa. Too many kills later to keep up with, too many faces shattered in his lens. He learned to turn pieces of himself off. The human side. Or maybe those pieces died in a hut in the Angolan jungle, as refugees assaulted him. Killed the woman he loved. It didn't pay to think about those things, because it just made the rage worse. He stared at the girl in the park, and followed her as she stood from the bench and carried the baby past the glittering fountain. She went into a big box baby store and didn't notice him step in behind her. The shelves were full of everything a young mother needed. Diapers, cloth, and disposable, dozens of brands with hundreds of boxes. He watched her wander the aisle, finger tracing across things she could never afford. Simple things like a sling to carry the child. She could just make her own, he thought, out of a sheet or a piece of fabric. He had seen hundreds of mothers in Africa do more with less. But this one, there was something about her. An innocence in her young face, the curve of her jaw as it met her neck. She seemed familiar, yet he knew he'd never met her before. The girl picked up a sling, looked at the price, and put it back on the shelf. "Can I help you?" the young clerk sneered. He looked her up and down, judgment carved in his smug little face. Brill thought about erasing it, but held back. "Just looking," she answered. Brill liked that she didn't rush away. She walked like she owned the place. He kept watching as she made the door, and saw her shoulders sag. He had felt like that before. The entire world against you, and nothing left, not even hope. His moral gray area didn't allow for wallowing in self-pity. There were bad men out there who took from the weak and innocent, took from young women like this girl. Maybe not her exactly. He didn't know her whole story. But it didn't matter, not to him, not at this moment. "May I help you, sir?" The clerk stood behind him. Brill pointed. "Just that." He held out a folded bill. Chapter 20. Jessie walked up the rickety stairs past the broken elevator. She carried the baby close to her chest, hugging it, protective arms wrapped tight. The energy from the fruit must have been gone, because she took the steps slowly, like a marathon runner after a long race. She stopped at the end of the hallway and stared at the grimy door to her one-room apartment. A small box wrapped in brown paper leaned against the door. Jessie glanced up and down the hallway, but it was empty. She walked up to the box and used one hand to tilt it, first to one side then the other, as she examined it for an address or markings or any indication of what it might be. But the plain brown wrapper held no answers. She picked it up and juggled with the edge of the paper, ripping it off. The package fell from her hand, and a long tearing sound punctured the room as it landed at her feet, so she could see the picture. It was the baby cinch. She glanced up and down the hall again, double-checking. Was this for her? It was at her door. Who could have left it? She didn't see through the dust and smog-covered window at the end of the hallway. If she had, she might have looked at a mirror window across the encrusted, filthy alleyway below, and Brill standing in the shadows of the window across the way. He watched her slip inside her studio door and left. He wrote her name down on a sheet of paper, copied from her mailbox, and left it on Claremont's desk at the church. Chapter 21. The parking garage was lonely and deserted. A single black BMW gleamed under a caged light near one of the concrete support. It had an added advantage of offering 8 inches of extra clearance between the spaces so that no one parking next to the automobile could ding the door. But it also created a blind spot. Someone new walking to the car might notice the deep patch of darkness next to the column where it met the wall. But someone who had made that trip 5 or 6 nights a week for the past 5 years with nothing happening would pay little attention to it. Maggie was her name. She was almost 6 feet tall, and high heels that clicked on the concrete as she walked across the parking garage. She had her phone in hand, but didn't pay attention to it as she fished the key fob out of her small purse. She pushed the red button on the fob and got the double tap on the horn, indicating the door was unlocked. She reached for the handle and saw Brill reflected in the tinted window. He was impressed she didn't scream. She spun around, purse at the ready, and relaxed visibly when she saw it with him. "My God, you scared me." Brill nodded. "He's dead." Maggie smirked. "I know. I had a visit from 2 of your, let's just call them associates, who informed me. They underbid you." She studied his face for a moment for a reaction, and seemed only slightly disappointed she didn't get one. "I want my deposit back," she told him using her best conference room power move voice. Brill stepped forward, blocking her body between the door of her car and the concrete column. He didn't lift his arms, just stared at her with black shark eyes. "That's a ballsy move, lady. We had a contract." Maggie struggled to catch her breath, finally realizing the danger she was in. Maybe even a little excited by it. "You didn't keep your end of the bargain." She struggled to keep her voice level. She watched as his hand reached into his pocket and pulled a small silenced .22 out. He let it drift in her direction, then shoved it into the waist of his pants. His hand dug a thick envelope out of the back. "I kept 100 for expenses." "You owe me," she said. Brill leaned in close, their lips almost touching. Her breath came quick, heaving the bosom of her silk shirt as she fought to catch it. "Don't push your luck," he growled, and slipped back into the darkness. She tried to listen for his footsteps, for any sound of him leaving. But all she felt was the silence and the empty feeling of being solo in the parking garage. She climbed into her expensive car and fired it up. Then she shrieked and buried her face in her arms as her hands clenched the wheel. Chapter 22. There is nothing special about L.A. after dark. All the magic blew away long ago, like litter on a Santa Ana wind. The glitz and glamour so many movies put out as propaganda covers up an underbelly so dark and deprived it boggles the mind. Anything can be had in the city of angles, for a price. Hookers, boys or girls, or worn-out old drag queens competed with a kaleidoscope of drugs for attention under the glaring buzz of overbright neon. Tourists hid behind cameras as the homeless wandered in a hunger-fueled daze. It could be madness or bad luck or just L.A. A famous line from a famous movie explained it all with one simple substitution. "It's Chinatown, Jake." Jack loved it. Every seedy boulevard, every dark corner. If he felt like a boy, he cruised West Hollywood. If he felt like a girl, it was any street, but Hollywood Boulevard was the best, even now full of almost pretty women trading whatever they could for a movie-promised dream. He was no billionaire industrialist, though. His palate tonight craved young flesh, and he circled the block 3 times as he searched for just the right girl. She was 16 going on 60, the fresh farm look starting to fade under a weary facade of crushed hope. It gathered around her like a cloud, a fog of despair that made her stand out in his eyes. He pulled to the curb and hit the electric window. She stepped forward, long legs sheathed in pleather boots, mini dress scrunched in the front and back with safety pins to show maximum skin. "Want a date?" he asked as he leaned over the passenger seat. "I'd love one, hot stuff," she said in a flat Iowa accent. The button locks unclicked and she climbed in. Chapter 23. The hotel room was on the 2nd floor, the last in a row of 12 on 12. The office was at the opposite end, and the room next to it and under it empty, but paid for by Jack. The establishment had a reputation of renting by the hour, though the chipped sign up front said easy overnight rates. Jack paid for 2 days in cash for the 3 rooms. He was in the last room with the young girl, her mini dress a wad of cloth on the floor. She was riding on top of him, making make-believe noises about how big he was, how good he was, how great she felt. He told her he would pay extra for that. He rocked into her harder, arching his back up, and she lost her balance to fall forward. He reached up with meaty paws and wrapped them around her throat. He clenched tight while she bucked and writhed against him. Her crimson fingernails drew red marks on his wrists as she struggled to pull his hands away. She couldn't breathe, couldn't escape. He pushed all the way into her as she shuddered, her hands slipped away from his arms. He finished inside her, but kept crushing his hands together even after she stopped moving. He waited, checked to make sure she wasn't breathing, then shoved her body over the side of the bed. She fell in a heap next to her crumpled dress. Jack went into the bathroom and washed his hands. He spent extra time on the scratches on his wrist. There was no telling what kind of gunk and bacteria that whore had under her nails. He whistled at his reflection in the grimy mirror. Chapter 24. Brill sat on the edge of his simple bed and opened a drawer in the nightstand. There were 5 $100 bills under a Glock 19 and extra magazine. He pulled them out and counted twice. It wasn't much, wasn't enough by far. In another country, he could make it last a month. In some places, he could go half a year on it. Beans and rice were cheap. But here, he needed more. DC was expensive. Getting there would mean another car, more guns, time for surveillance. He might need specialized equipment, though a hunter's rifle would do in a pinch. The agreement with Klein and Jack was costing him money. He should have just shot them when they were in the car. Brill lifted the pistol and considered shooting them now. It would open the job market tight enough already and bring more cash his way. He considered it for a moment and put the pistol back in the drawer. Not yet, he thought. He wanted to see how things played out. Chapter 25. I wish this visit were more social, said Rano as he sat on the end of the couch in Claremont's office. The bishop said it was important, the priest answered. That is good enough for me. And of the contents of the message? Rano inquired. Claremont took a sip of tea and set the cup down on the table in front of them. We put our faith in the stars now. Rano mimicked his actions. The church uses all of the resources at its disposal, he stated. And this matter is of grave importance. We have determined that a prophecy has come to pass in your parish. A woman has borne the son of Satan. Claremont reached forward and lifted his cup. He tried to hide the tremor in his hand as he glanced around at the Bibles that littered the landscape of his office. There were hundreds of mentions of the devil, the fallen angel, and Lucifer in thousands of texts, but he wasn't sure if he believed in a literal interpretation. He had prayed on it often. In some instances, there was historical evidence to support the devil incarnate was a creation of the church, a metaphor to bring believers into the fold, a common enemy to fight, and a reason to explain behavior they could not understand. In my parish, he asked to buy time. The bishop has sent us to destroy him, Rano said with a fervent gleam in his eyes. But how can this be true? Claremont debated. We both know that certain elements, certain histories have been created over time. The man sent by the bishop picked up his cup, refilled it from the pot, and blew steam off the top. It is hard to believe, he agreed. But believe you must. I have seen things in this world. The church has sent me to deal with nightmares around the globe. But you do not believe in this, Claremont told him. Our lives, our work is based on faith. And if we have faith in the good, we must also have faith in evil. You have seen evil at work here in your parish. This city is no place for angels. Claremont shared a distracted nod. It was true. LA was a hotbed of human horrors, but no worse than any large population center. "What are we to do?" he asked. "Find the mother, destroy the child." So simple. So brutal. Claremont began to pace the room. "I cannot believe this," he stated. "But it is true. We are men of God. We are men of the cloth." "Exactly my point. We can't do this." "But we must," Rano argued. "For if we believe in God and His Word, then we must accept this to be true. And if we do nothing to stop this evil, you are asking me to betray all that I hold sacred." Rano stood in front of him and stopped the pacing. "I am asking you to act as liaison. The bishop has read the reports you sent in, of the man who comes to visit you." "Those were shared in confidence," Claremont gasped. "As if with my confessor." "It was necessary to break that trust for this," Rano said. Claremont collapsed in his chair and pulled at his hair with his hands. "I'm to make the arrangements." "A difficult burden," said Rano. "How do you know this woman?" Rano pulled a piece of paper out of his pocket and held it out to the priest. "We matched birth records to the signs," he said. "This is the mother and child." "An innocent," Claremont sighed. "The greatest evil the world has ever known." Claremont stared at the handwritten note. "It must be done," Rano told him. The bishop's man pulled a second envelope out of his pocket and laid it on the desk. He patted Claremont on the shoulder as he left. The priest remained in the chair for several moments, then moved to check the package the man left behind. It contained several bound stacks of $100 bills, more than he made in a year in his parish. He took the name and slipped it into the envelope, then put it into his pocket. He didn't need to reach out to anyone. He only knew one man who was a killer, and he couldn't just wait for him to show. Chapter 26. Claremont waited anxious in the confessional. He twisted and squirmed in the velvet seat, searching for any position that might offer comfort. None was coming. He heard the rustle of someone settling into the booth. "Forgive me, Father, but how did you get my number?" asked Brill. "One of the parishioners works at the phone company." "I'm not listed." "It's a different kind of phone company." Brill nodded thoughtful. He knew the Vatican maintained a database of known operatives in their own secret archives. There was a chance he was in those archives for some work he did prior to landing in Los Angeles. It was a problem for another day. "How can I help the church?" "I wanted to hire your services," the priest stuttered. Brill started at the man through the grate that separated them. It was an ornate woodworked carving, polished by years of fingers that rubbed against the wood. "You know that I do." "I do." Brill considered the request for a moment. As a minor student of history, he knew the church had done worse in the past than hire a hitman. "What's the job?" Maybe they wanted him to paint the vestibule. "There is a woman," the priest said in a halting voice. "She has borne the Antichrist." "You know I'm not a believer, Father. In this perhaps I'll join you. But I am called by a higher purpose, and in this instance that purpose is the papacy. It's been decreed." The church was going to hire him to kill a woman and child. He almost walked away. He almost reached through the grate and ripped out the priest's trachea. He almost said no. Then he considered the deep pockets of the church. Pockets that could set him up for years. Pockets that could allow him to escape this half-life he found himself living and hating. An assassin had tried to kill him, and he had been in some form of hiding ever since. Hunting and hiding. The church could pay for that hunt. "How many Hail Marys is my penance?" he asked. The priest giggled. Brill stood up and stepped outside of the thick velvet curtain. The priest's hand slipped between the folds and held out a thick envelope. Brill grabbed the envelope and opened it. 2 bundles of $100 bills were inside, tucked under blue bands with the amount $10,000 printed on them. There was a piece of paper with wiring instructions for a completion payment. The curtain parted. The cash is a per diem. The payment will be sent upon completion. Brill stuck the envelope into his coat pocket. Her name and address are in the envelope as well. Brill watched as Claremont moved behind the altar and slipped into a small door hidden in the wall. He stared up at the Christ crucified on the cross on the north wall of the church and wondered what he would make of this contract. Chapter 27. Brill stood outside of the building on the corner of Abbot Kinney and Washington and couldn't believe it. Call it fate or kismet or just damn dumb luck, but the name on the box matched the name on the small business card from the envelope. This was the woman and child he had seen in the store. This was the woman he had taken pity on, the woman whose wifeish eyes and resilient, stubborn fortitude had spoken to him. He wanted to laugh, but it was too stupid to even consider. The church wanted to kill this unemployed single mother that the errant knight in his soul wanted to save. He watched as she exited the building and started to walk along Abbot Kinney. She was wearing the baby cinch he had bought at Left as a gift. She didn't notice as he tailed her. There was no tradecraft involved, even though the sidewalk wasn't crowded. He just stayed one block back as she led him to the grocery store near her home. He watched through the window as she filled out an application and handed it to the manager, who shook his head, shook her hand, and sent her on way. This was going to be easy. He could walk up behind her on the street and bump her into the path of an oncoming car. Abbot Kinney was heavily traveled, and even though the speed limit was a sensible 30 miles an hour, most LA drivers interpreted that to mean no more than 30 over the limit. Plus, there was no guarantee a car accident would do the trick, which would require him to finish the job in a hospital. He wasn't up for that prospect, so he rejected the quickly formulated plan as he followed behind her. She looked dejected, and tired, and determined as he followed her to 3 more establishments with the exact same results. Shaking heads, shaking hands, shoulders back and keep marching. He really hated this job. The hallway to her building still smelled like Indian food, the musky scent of spiced curry clinging to the peeling paint. Brill paced the hallway and muttered. He hated this job, hated this feeling. He hated the indecision, and hated himself for the way he felt. The simple solution was to just do it. Kill the girl, kill the kid, take the money and run. His hunt for Ronnie had to end. It was all-consuming, this ghost life he was living. He might as well have died in the desert outside of San Diego. Just do it, he muttered, and felt like he should be wearing a pair of Nike running shoes. He walked up to her door, pulled out his pistol and pressed the silencer against the peephole. Brill lifted a fist to knock and pulled up short. It would be easy. Knock on the door, wait for the peephole to go dark indicating her eye was pressed against it, and pull the trigger. Pick the lock, go in and finish the kid. Simple. Easy. Effective. The church would pay, and he could go away. Someplace like Florida. A nice quiet community in Florida, near the beach. He would take up surfing again and running, 2 things he had let slide in the past year. He would retire. 1 trigger pull away from being done forever. A twitch of 3 muscles in his arm was all that stood between him and peace. Hush, little baby, don't say a word, he heard the soft strains of a lullaby through the thin panel door. He growled. He would have rather screamed, but shoved the gun back in the holster and stalked down the grimy stairs. Chapter 28. Brill marched up the street to the steps of St. Paul's. The clear blue sky and bright sunshine did nothing to allay his mood. He spied Jack and Klein in their sedan across the street. For a brief moment, he considered walking over to them, pulling out his pistol and popping them both in the head. It was a double-tap solution to end the aggravation of their surveillance. Jack shot him the bird. "You got a license to fly that," he called as he took the steps 2 at a time. He may have sauntered a little in an attempt to draw them out of the car. It didn't work. Inside there were 2 people in front of him, in line for confession. They were pensioners, so he wasn't sure what they had to confess, but he waited patiently on the pew across from the booth. An older woman in her 90s came to sit beside him, to wait for her turn. He nodded and smiled. She crossed herself, but Brill hoped that was more for the location than anything related to him. He made his way into the booth and peered through the grate. Claremont leaned against the wall, eyes glazed in boredom or some mastery of trick sleep. "I can't do it," he growled. The priest startled up and peered through the grate. "Oh, thank God," he exclaimed. "You're not disappointed?" asked Brill. "Disappointed you have a conscience," said the priest. "No, I'm not disappointed. I've been praying for the day that you see the wrong in what you do." "You hired me," Brill interrupted. "I was asked to hire you by the church. That doesn't mean I believe in what they want. I don't believe it either. I think they're wrong on this one. We are men, so we're not infallible. You keep saying we, but it seems like it's a them versus I type situation. I only kill people I think deserve it. Believe me, Father, there are a lot of people in this world that deserve it. But she's not one of them." "Blessed is the miracle," said the priest. He leaned forward to peer through the grate, but the booth was empty. Claremont jumped up and swiped the curtain aside. He startled the 90-year-old woman as she scuttled to the booth. "Father," she squeaked. "Start without me," he said, and rushed after Brill. Claremont didn't notice Rano slip around the altar and trail after him. Chapter 29. He caught up with Brill at the top of the cathedral steps. Claremont grabbed Brill by the sleeve of his coat and stopped him. "The church will send someone else. Should I do something about it?" Claremont considered him for a moment. This man standing in front of him, cast in the shadows of the church bell tower even as the sun shone all around. "I thought with your change of conscience," said the priest. "I said I wouldn't do it," Brill answered. "Now it's up to you to stop them. You don't know who we're dealing with. This is the church." "And here's the steeple," said Brill. "Open the door and look at the people. People make up the church, Father. Call them off. I did my part. Besides, everybody dies." Brill glanced across the street to Klein and Jack in the sedan. Some sooner than others. His mind made up, Brill strode down the steps and crossed the street to the sedan. Rano watched the exchange. When Brill was out of earshot, he slithered up next to Claremont. "Was that him?" "He won't do it." "But the whore." "He said we are mistaken." "I agree with him." "The signs are there," said Rano. He licked his chapped lips with a narrow tongue. "You must change his mind." "I agree with him." "It doesn't matter what you agree with, or what he thinks. This is an order from His Holiness. You are risking his wrath." "God forgives," said Claremont. "I'm sure His Holiness will do the same." Chapter 30. The cloudless sky and vibrant sunlight had turned the street corridor into an oven, baking the temperatures a good 10 degrees warmer. The dark sedan was a heat magnet. Even so, Jack and Klein sat in the front seat with the car turned off and only the windows down for ventilation. Brill walked up and leaned down to the open window. He placed a hand on the top of the doorframe and jerked it back. "Damn it," he said. "You need to work on your manners," said Klein. "What are you doing back here? Did you take another job on the sly?" "Why don't you ladies go sell crazy somewhere else?" asked Brill. "We're going," answered Klein. "And you're going with us." He opened the door and grabbed Brill by the arm. He jerked him in close to wrestle him into the back seat. Brill spun Klein around and flipped him over onto the ground. He put a foot on his neck. Jack jumped out of his side of the car and raced around the trunk. He pulled a pistol from his shoulder holster and brought it to bear. Brill jumped inside the arc of his arm and slapped the pistol out of Jack's hand. He grabbed him by the lapels of his coat and jerked down, brought his knee into Jack's groin. The man collapsed with a moan that made other grown men shiver. Klein fumbled his pistol out of his holster. Brill stepped on his hand and crunched the gun out of his hand. Out here in public, you boys are drawing a lot of unnecessary attention. Very disappointing. He kicked the gun away from Klein and watched in satisfaction as it spun toward the gutter and dropped down a storm drain. Bastard, Jack groaned. I've been called worse, said Brill. He turned his back and walked away from the two squirming men as a crowd gathered on the edge of the street. Claremont and Rano watched from the top of the church steps. The 90-year-old from the confessional struggled to open the heavy oak door behind them. Father, she asked. I'm coming, answered Claremont. He looked at Rano, who watched Brill slip around the corner up the street. Contact the council. Call them off, said Claremont. He took the arm of the waiting senior and escorted her back into the cathedral. Rano glared at the back of Claremont as he walked inside the church. It was easy enough to say call it off, quite another to approach the real power. Claremont could make the request, but it was up to Rano to deliver it and suffer the consequences of a group that believed that killing the messenger was just one way to control the message. Rano did not feel like being killed, did not feel like being a messenger. If this assassin choice of Claremont wasn't willing to do the job, perhaps he could find appropriate alternatives. Like the two men clambering up from supine positions in the street below. Rano wondered if they would be sufficiently motivated by money. They had that look about them, the look of hard men with just a hint of desperation. He knew it well. It was a look he saw often in the mirror. He rushed down the steps and crossed the road. A passing car honked as he stepped in front of it. That got the attention of the two men who leaned against the side of their car to recover. They watched him approach, wary. Gentlemen, Rano said, I have a proposition for you. Chapter 31. Brill was back on Abbot Kinney, cruising slowly along the avenue. Traffic was backed up and slow as the end-of-day work crowd searched for food, drinks, and nightlife. The beach people were leaving the tourist-filled boardwalk, which made the roads a little worse than normal. He saw an open parking space and whipped in. It would be faster to walk, though he wasn't sure why he was back in the neighborhood. He had told Claremont he was done. He locked the car and strolled along the sidewalk. He thought about doing surveillance detection. Just slip down a walk street which peppered the neighborhood and see if anyone followed him. Instead, he saw a familiar dark sedan parked ahead. Brill slipped over to the inside edge of the sidewalk, which would keep him out of view of the mirror, and moved quietly up next to the car. It was empty. He glanced across the street to Jesse's building. Klein and Jack positioned themselves on either side of the door. They exchanged glances, then pulled out their pistols. Klein had a replacement for the one he lost, this one a snub-nosed .38 he kept in the glove box. It was a backup weapon and rudimentary. Jack was going to do the heavy lifting on this one, as he screwed a silencer onto the end of his Glock 19. Klein nodded to his partner. Jack reached down and rapped on the door. They could hear footsteps approaching. Who is it? Jesse asked through the door. Delivery, said Klein. Both men tensed as the chain rattled. The stairwell door jerked open, and Brill leaned into the hallway. Jack whirled around and fired off 3 silenced shots that echoed in the quiet corridor. Brill ducked back into the stairwell. His gun hand peeked around the edge of the door and spat bullets up the hall. Jack and Klein had nowhere to hide. They backed toward the elevator, ducking and dodging as bullets whizzed past their head. Klein raised the .38, but Jack held him up. He jammed the elevator call button. The doors pinged open, and the two men scrambled inside. Brill leaned in from the stairwell. He advanced up the hallway, his gun aimed at the elevator doors. He watched as it descends and moved back to knock on Jessie's door. "I called the police," she yelled from the back of her apartment. "You don't have a phone," answered Brill. "Stay away from the windows." "Someone called them," she answered back. "I'll scream." "Do you think that will stand out in this neighborhood?" he asked. "There were 2 men sent here to kill you. I stopped them." "Kill me? Why would anyone want to kill me?" "Open the door." "We have to get out of here," he said. "I'm not opening the door," said Jessie. "The baby thing." The cinch. Brill kept watch on the elevator. It was stopped at the lobby, but there was still the stairway too. His gun tracked from the elevator to the stairs and back again. "That was you," said Jessie. He could tell from her voice that she had moved closer to the door. "I need you to open up," he said. "I'll keep you safe. Both of you." The door cracked open, the chain still attached. Giant blue eyes stared out at Brill, watched as he kept track of the elevator and stairwell and back again. "Why would you do that?" she asked. "You don't even know me." "You need it," he said. "Like the sling, like the food. You need help." He caught the look on her face and stopped. He turned to lock eyes with her. "Those men are going to come back," he said. "We have to get out of here." "Why should I trust you?" Brill passes his pistol through the open door. "But let me in. I don't want to be caught out here unarmed." She half aimed the pistol in his direction and shut the door. He heard the chain unlatch and she cracked the door open. He stepped inside as she backed away from him, the gun still bouncing in his direction. "You need to pack," he said. "We're getting out." Adam started crying in his bassinet. "Where will we go?" she asked as she went to the baby. "Do you have family? Friends?" He knew the answer even as he asked. There were people in the world who were all alone. She was one of them. So was he. "He's all I've got." She sat the pistol on a scratched end table and lifted the baby. She cuddled him close. Brill waited while Jessie packed a bag. It didn't take long. One of the advantages of being broke and having nothing was there wasn't much to pack. He felt like that should make him sad, but it was an unfamiliar sensation. He had lived such a Spartan existence for so long, having almost nothing was a way of life. Unless he was building a cover identity, he kept every necessity to a bare minimum. It was easier that way. Even if it was no way to raise a baby. Jessie packed a diaper bag that looked too light, and a backpack for clothes. Brill slung it over one shoulder, and it couldn't have weighed 20 pounds. "Try to keep quiet," he said. "I know it won't be easy with an infant," he responded to the look she gave him. "Just do your best." He pulled his pistol and eased the door open after making her stand back. The hall was clear. He led them to the stairwell and down to the lobby. He was keyed up and on high alert, which made her nervous and tense. She took small steps and shuffled behind him. He chose the back door instead of the front, reasoning that if the 2 hitmen had split up, he would have better odds. The back route was free, which made him wonder where they were and when they would try again. It was just a matter of time. He pulled Jessie up next to him and walked shoulder to shoulder in an effort to pass as a couple. A man leading a woman down the street stuck out, and people remembered or noticed. A couple walking their baby looked like they belonged, and Brill wanted people to see them without paying attention to them. "Where are we going?" she asked. "I don't know yet. I can't wander the streets all night. Sure, when I was a kid, 9 months ago, I could stay out all hours, but I have a baby now." "I noticed. I followed you because you said I was in trouble. I want to believe you're trying to help. I just don't know why I believe you." She stopped at the edge of an alley. "Maybe because you bought me my first and only baby gift. Maybe I trust the look in your eyes, or maybe I'm desperate and you're the first person to be nice to me in a long time. I don't know. But I can't go any further without a plan. Tell me what's going on. We need to keep moving. No. She held Adam to her bosom and stuck her chin out defiantly. Brill noted she had a tiny scar on her skin, an imperfection on an otherwise flawless complexion, which served to make her more beautiful. You should have listened to him, lady. Jessie jumped as a giant man in a leather coat stepped out of the dark alley. Brill grabbed her arm and maneuvered her behind him. The man had a pistol in his hand, aimed at them. Brill noted that the barrel wasn't steady. You want to keep walking, pal? The thug leered at Jessie. Your man has a death wish, lady. Give me your wallet, your purse. He's got a gun, said Jessie. Brill hopped forward and jerked the man's gun arm up. He ripped the pistol out of his hand and something snapped. The thug squealed. Brill shot out a fist to his throat and a foot to the inside of his knee. The man folded with a wet crunch. Brill grabbed the back of his head and slammed a knee against his face. The would-be mugger slumped in Brill's grip. Brill heaved him back into the alley with a sickening thump. We need to keep moving. Jessie drew in a sharp breath and stepped away from Brill. What was that? Krav Maga. Israeli street fighting. Did you kill him? Brill glanced up the alley. Probably. Jessie went pale and started to sway. Her breath came in sharp little gasps. Brill caught her as she pitched forward and scooped her up. He cradled the girl and baby in his arms. They snuck up the street to his car. Chapter 32. He took her to his apartment, and reasoning that the front may be watched, snuck her through the back door. His shoulders and arms ached as he trudged up the stairs, and it was a borderline miracle he didn't drop her as he fumbled the key in the lock. The small hair he kept on the door was still in place, a low-tech throwback to warn him if someone was in the flat. Brill carried Jessie across the room and gently laid her onto the second-hand sofa. He adjusted her so she cradled Adam between her body and the cushions, then spent a moment wondering if she would roll over on top of the baby and crush him. Her eyes stirred as he debated. What happened? You fainted. She looked at him with wild eyes, then glanced around the apartment before checking on Adam. Is he okay? She asked. I didn't let either of you fall, Brill advised. I have coffee or water. Jessie perched on the couch cushion and drew her knees to her chest. She kept one hand on Adam, gently rubbing his chest. Water would be great. I haven't eaten much today. Brill walked over to the cabinets above the counter and dug out a box of snack crackers. He pulled a water bottle out of the fridge and handed them both to Jessie. I don't have much here, but I'll go out and get food. She stuffed crackers in her mouth and washed it down with the water. She ate like it had been more than a day, and Brill considered it likely she had gone days without food. Formula was expensive, as was diapers, and she seemed the type to go without so that her baby wouldn't. As if sensing his thoughts, she scooped Adam off the couch and held him to her breast. She lifted her shirt and tucked down the edge of her bra. What are you doing? He's hungry. Brill rushed to the window and stood to one side. I should go get food, he said. For us. That way you can have some privacy. It doesn't bother me, she said. You should see some of the looks I get in public. You do that in public? And private. It's no big deal, it's just feeding the baby. Yes, but, he squirmed. I really should be so okay with this, but didn't you just kill a man tonight? What's your point? Boobs make you nervous? I'm not nervous. He marched over to the kitchen side of the studio and arranged the plate on the counter. It's just a boob. I have another. Every other woman has them. Your boobs don't bother me. So you like my boobs, she smiled. That's my cue to leave. You don't have to go. I'll keep my boob hidden behind the baby. I was serious about the food. We need to eat and make a plan. Do you want anything in particular? Chapter 33. There are two types of people in the world. Those who go into the store with a plan, a list, and want to get out as fast as possible with little or no hassle. The second type are annoying. They linger in the aisles, circle the deli like sharks, hover over free sample trays, and discuss recipes with stock boys who stare in slack-jawed wonder at the people who consider them chefs. Brill was a hunter. He went into the store with a list in mind and a plan to spend no more than 5 minutes in the crowd. It was a good plan. Circle the edges of the store for fresh fruit, fresh meat. Avoid aisle after aisle of processed junk. If he was only hunting for himself, it would be a quick trip down the health food section for protein bars, which he used to supplement bagged salad, bagged chicken and hummus that made up the majority of his meals. But he was hunting for two, and the other half had a special request. He could have said no. He could have played it safe. But he wanted to offer some small pleasure in an otherwise very bad day. So, he fought the squeaky-wheeled cart that always lurched to the left down the snack food aisle, and grabbed a box of ding-dongs to put on top of the diapers, deli sushi, and bananas. A grumpy old man raced to the checkout line and cut him off. He pulled out a wad of wrinkled coupons that had to be manually keyed in, because the scanner couldn't read the barcode, and then counted out pocket change to the exact penny to pay for his purchase. Brill almost shot him. It was worth it when he watched Jessie eat a ding-dong. She sat on the couch and unwrapped the foil in a deliberate fashion, then took small nibbles as she savored every bite. Quite possibly the world's most perfect food, she licked crumbs from her Cupid bow lips. With zero nutritional value, he answered. Some value comes from the soul, she shot back. This is the ultimate soul food. It makes angels smile. Like a baby giggle, he said. Pure magic. Have you had one? Never. She rooted around in the box and considered a treat for a moment before throwing to him. He noted the look of regret on her face even as she shared. He unwrapped the foil not quite as carefully as she did and took a large bite. She was right. It was a damn good tasting cake. I don't normally say I told you so, she grinned. He devoured the ding-dong and reached for one more. Chapter 34. Sunlight drifted through the smog-stained window in the living room, casting twilight streamers that crawled up Brill's leg. He heard baby noises, that cooing, gurgling giggle sound that came from the bedroom, and opened his eyes. He was stretched out in the chair, his long legs propped up on the coffee table. He was very familiar with sleep sitting, and had a passing familiarity with sleep standing. He stood slowly and stretched out the kinks before moving to the open door to the bedroom. Jessie had Adam on his back, in a nest of blankets in the middle of the bed. She played with him with one hand, tickled his chin, rubbed his belly. They both looked happy and oblivious to the danger waiting for them outside the apartment. How did you sleep? Did he keep you awake? She asked. So much for sleeping like a baby, said Brill. I'm sorry. She looked like she meant it. Babies will be babies, he said. Don't worry about it. What next? She asked. We need to decide that. Can we stay here? A few more hours. Those guys know where I live, or they can find out. So we're not safe here. I'll go take care of it. Just like that. Maybe not quite just like that, but close enough. She watched him with intent blue eyes, and Brill felt a shiver trickle across his spine. I made a promise, he said. Chapter 35. Brill marched along the street like a man on a mission. No one bothered him. No one ever did. Part of it was body language. If someone looked like they were in charge and knew where they were going, people stayed out of their way. Unless those people were trained to watch for it. Watch for someone like him. His eyes tracked everything. Every car that passed, and in LA there were a lot of them. Every person on the street. Anyone who seemed out of place. Hard enough to pick out on a normal day. LA was not just a city of cars, it was a city of eccentrics. A lot of people could look out of place and just be on their way to work. Brill paused at the corner across from the church and looked for it. The spot where Klein usually parked was empty, the spaces occupied by different vehicles. Empty vehicles. He double-checked just to be sure, then crossed the street and took the steps 3 at a time. Brill hit the door and slipped inside, moving to the right to plant his back against a solid wall. He waited. No one followed him in. No one hit the door or took a shot at him in the sanctuary. Just a normal day inside the quiet building. The soft tones of a choir on speakers hidden in the alcoves. The smell of wax candles flickering on an altar. A few parishioners in the pews, heads bowed, as they prayed toward the wooden statue suspended on the back wall. Brill moved along the right side of the cathedral, stormed up to the confessional and ripped aside the velvet curtain. The young priest squealed and flinched. "May I help you?" He recovered. Brill shook his head and stalked toward the rear of the building. Claremont perched on the edge of his desk with a Bible in his hands, poring over the words as if they would offer a new answer to him on this day. He glanced up as Brill stepped into the room. "What are you doing back here?" Then the priest scrambled behind his desk, putting the massive oak between him and the black-eyed man making a beeline for him in the tight room. "Call off the shooters," Brill growled. "I did," Claremont answered. "You did." Brill watched the man hold the chair with 2 hands, keeping behind it to add one more shield between them. Not that it would do him much good. Bullets would slip through the chair, the wood slowing them down enough to make the pain unbearable as the soft points bounced around inside the priest. If he shot him, he could just kick the chair against the wall, pin the priest behind it, and throttle him until his tongue turned blue. Or crush his throat with one hand and leave the man to flop around dying on the floor. He did none of that. The priest was terrified and confused. It was easy enough to understand. Brill had that effect on a lot of people. "Someone tried to steal my contract last night." Claremont nodded. "But you are the only killer I know." 2 more made a move on the girl. "Did they get her?" The priest licked his lips. He was afraid, not just of Brill, but of the act of playing in this world. It was far beyond taking confession and offering last rites, meeting senior parishioners, and bemoaning the falling population of the congregation. This was playing at God, and he didn't like it. But his orders came from the highest office, who had access to information he did not. "I saved her," Brill answered. Claremont sighed and dropped into the seat he had been using as a shield just moments before. "Thank God." "You can thank me. If I hadn't been there, God would have let it happen." "Perhaps Providence guided you," the priest said. "I think my lust guided me, but you can spin it how you like." "Where is she?" Brill studied him for a moment. The priest was strong in his commitment, strong in his faith. But he had seen stronger men in Africa give away information just to avoid pain. There were things the man could know, and things he wouldn't. "She's safe." Claremont calculated the response. He saw the look in the hitman's eyes and the measurement of him within, and he felt a small thrill of shame tickle his spine. He suspected this man found many people lacking, just as the priest would find the hitman's faith lacking. Claremont held back a sigh. "Can you keep her that way?" "Until you cancel the other contract." Brill watched the man's eyebrows crinkle in confusion. "But I didn't discuss this with anyone else. I don't know anyone who would do what you do." "Then get on the phone," Brill advised. "Your church wants this done. You find out who is asking for it, and stop them." Claremont nodded. "Or I will," Brill warned him. The priest shivered. He watched the man leave the door open as he left. Neither noticed Rano behind it as he eavesdropped on their conversation. Chapter 36. Klein's car was parked in the middle of a vast expanse of desert, on the edge of Joshua Tree. The long dirt road stretched toward the horizon, lonely under a crystal blue sky. A muffled scream tore through the serenity of the landscape, followed on the heels by the shrill trill of a cell phone. Klein stood 20 feet from the rear of the car and fished a cell phone out of the inside pocket of his jacket. Yeah. Another scream. What? Klein wheeled around. Hey, shut up, will you? I'm talking on the phone. Jack stood over a man in his underwear. The portly fellow was bound with his shirt and gagged with his tie. His pants were a rumpled lump on the ground near the trunk of the car. Jack used the man's belt to beat him. His back was a mass of red welts, tiger stripes of blood. He stared at Klein for a moment, wild eyes trying to come back to reality. Sorry, he muttered. I was talking to him, Klein nodded toward the sobbing man. You weren't the one making all the noise. Jack slicked his hair back with one hand and took 2 steps forward to launch a kick into the head of the man on the ground. Quiet, he shouted. The bound man lolled in the dust and dirt, coughing and sputtering through his expensive silk tie. Better? Jack asked. Klein turned his back on them and spoke into the phone. What is it? He glared at the receiver after a moment. All right, we're on our way. He folded the phone, slipped it back into his pocket, and passed Jack on the way to the car. Let's go. Jack dropped the belt, pulled a pistol, and sent 2 shots into the man, one to the head, the second to the heart. He fell in step beside Klein. The back door of the car opened and spilled a naked blonde woman onto the ground. She stood on wobbly legs and stared at the spreading pool of crimson near the man behind the car. Harold, she shrieked and tottered toward him. He's taking a nap, sweetheart, Klein answered. You done with her? Jack nodded. Klein let her get past him, pulled out his pistol and popped her in the back of the head. She sprawled across Harold, leg twitching up a miniature dust cloud as the impulses kept firing in her synapse. The 2 killers got into the car and sent up a trail of dust to wash over the bodies as they tore down the long winding road back to civilization. Chapter 37. Jessie sat in the chair holding her son and watched the door with wide eyes. Every sound made her flinch, every car horn made her jump. Her fidgeting made the baby fuss, and she divided her time between trying to soothe the infant and preparing to run at the slightest sound. Heavy footsteps passed outside the door. She held her breath as a key grated in the lock and almost pitched over backwards as the wood panel swung in. Brill stepped in fast and shut the door behind him with one hand, bolting it. He held 2 bags of groceries in his arm and stared at Jessie facing the door. Sorry I'm late, he said. I wasn't worried, she lied. He almost asked why she rearranged his furniture, but turning the chair to face a doorway was something he would have done. He wouldn't have sat in it unarmed, but the principle was the same. She was on guard, watching, and still keyed up from the firefight. He had been at it so long, the adrenaline dumps left his system after just a few hours. He could even meditate his heart rate back down. But for someone who wasn't used to it, that much excitement could keep them moving for days. Brill moved toward the galley kitchen. I picked up a few things, he told her. I didn't know what you liked, so I guessed. He set the bags on the counter and tossed a box of aluminum-wrapped chocolate cakes toward her. She caught it with one hand and beamed. Good guess. She watched as he unpacked, moving around the kitchen with a clumsy sense of unfamiliarity. Jessie glanced down at her sleeping son and took him into the bedroom. She lay him in a nest of pillows, blocking the baby so it can't move on the mattress, and returned to continue watching the show in the kitchen. Brill pulled out a new pot, rinsed it, and set water to boil. He dumped a container of red sauce into a second pot and stirred it with the tip of his finger. She watched as he took a bag of pasta and ripped off the end. The thin plastic tore the length of the package and spilled the dry noodles across the counter. Enough, she said, and moved into the shallow kitchen. Move. He stood back and let her take over. "I tried," he said. "A for effort, but I'm too hungry for you to mess this up." She scooped up the fallen pasta and dumped it in the pot. Then she began digging in the bag, pulled out a tomato and garlic clove. "This all the spice you got?" she smirked. "I don't use spice usually." He stepped further back. "You have to use spice," she said. "If you've got it. Everybody needs more spice in their life." Her ears perked up a second before he heard the infant crying from the bedroom, and marveled at a mother's instinct. "Can you get him for me?" She kept dicing the tomatoes and dropped them in the simmering sauce in the pot. "Me? I'm not about to leave you with any of this." She crushed the garlic and added it. Brill gulped. He couldn't remember if he had ever held an infant before. Certainly when he was younger, he must have. But when most people were building families and settling down, he was traversing Africa and Europe, keeping them safe to do so at a price. He quirked his head to one side, digging deep in his memory. After Veronica shot him, some of it had been dodgy, fog-shrouded, but he felt it was coming back. The pieces were falling in place, and none of those pieces had an infant in the picture. "You gonna just stand there?" she smirked. Brill started for the side of the loft he used as a bedroom. The smirk interested him. There was a story behind the smirk, almost like a question. Sure, he could save her life, but could he stop the kid from crying? Since he couldn't make dinner and she had to take over, this was a challenge. The smirk was a gauntlet. Brill stood at the edge of the bed, and the baby noticed him. The cry turned to a gurgle. Not quite a wail, but the hint of one. "What do I do?" he called out over his shoulder. "Check if he's wet." Brill leaned forward and studied the baby. His proximity made the crying stop, the baby staring at him with curious eyes. "Are you wet?" No answer from the infant. "How?" Brill called out. "Feel his diaper." He reached forward and put his hand on the diaper. "Sorry about this," he muttered, half in jest. The baby cooed. "It's wet," he answered Jesse. "Can you change it?" He almost said no. If he'd never held an infant in his adult life, he knew he had never changed a diaper. But how hard could it be? He could field strip an AK-47 in a midnight downpour, reassemble the weapon, and win a firefight. Surely changing a diaper couldn't be that difficult. First things first, gather supplies. He fished a tiny little swath of plastic from the diaper bag next to the chair. "You going to be okay?" Jessie watched him, a spoon in each hand, as she whipped up some culinary concoction from the limited supplies he bought and had on hand. "I'll manage," he said. She smirked again, still challenging him. He decided to smirk back and earned a grin. Brill returned to the bed and stripped off the wet diaper. The baby wasn't done and sprayed warm wet piss at him. He was able to dodge most of the stream, but it soaked his shoulder and the bed. "You were waiting for that, weren't you?" The infant giggled. "Did you do that on purpose?" Brill muttered as he slipped the fresh diaper under the bottom and used the sheet to dry off the baby. He folded it closed and double-checked the tape. It wasn't pretty, but it would hold, and he supposed that would be good enough for a couple of hours until it was wet again. He lifted the baby up in his hands and carried it toward the living area. Jessie sashayed out of the kitchen and took her son from Brill. He stripped out of his shirt and dropped the urine-soaked fabric in the corner, then fished a new t-shirt out of his go bag. He heard Jessie hiss from the kitchen. "What happened to you?" He pulled the shirt over his head and settled it around his trim waist. Brill forgot about the scars, so much a part of him now for years. But they sometimes influenced the people around him, especially if they had never seen bullet wounds before, or knife wounds, or battle burns, whip marks, and 100 other skirmish souvenirs. Like the time he was in a building that blew up and collapsed, or the time he was shot, or the time he was shot again. What is it they say? Brill tried to smile as he turned toward her. You should see the other guy. She brought him a full plate in one hand, holding the baby in the other. Who are you? She asked. No one of consequence. He took the plate and twirled the fork in the pasta, but waited until she was seated in the chair. Jessie balanced a plate on one knee, the baby in her other arm, and ate like an expert. Does it hurt? She asked between mouthfuls. No, I think it tastes good. The smirk came back. Sorry about the golden shower, she told him. Mommy forgets to warn people about my little sharpshooter. Don't worry about it, he answered. It's not the first time. You have kids? He shook his head and took in a forkful of sauce-dripping pasta. But someone peed on you before. Jellyfish, he explained. Though he had been peed on by accident when they were making nitrate for gunpowder once. He didn't think explaining that would help, though. How's the pasta? Spicy, he sucked wind across his burning tongue. Good. I think so. I haven't lost my touch. It's been a long time since I cooked for somebody. It's been longer since someone cooked for me, he confessed. How did your meeting go today? I was waiting for you to ask. I borrowed some money from the company I worked for right before him. She kissed the top of her baby's head. I figured my old boss held a grudge. That, or my cell phone bill was getting too big, and they tried new tactics to collect. Brill finished off his plate and debated how much to tell her. His life was full of secrets, as numerous as the scars on his flesh. But there was something about this woman, something in the way she watched him, in the way she cuddled her baby. The church hired them. Which church? The Catholic Church. The Catholic Church wants me dead, she shook her head. It doesn't make sense. Not you, said Brill as he stared at the bundle in her arms. Your baby. They want someone to kill my son. Why the hell would they do that? She set the plate down and wrapped her arms around the infant in her arms, as if she could protect it. He saw the fire flash in her eyes, the squint of anger that hinted at hidden strength. They think he's the son of the devil, he answered. He moved across the room and scooped up her empty plate and placed them both on the counter. Roger, she sniffed. The devil. He's an accountant. I mean, I called him a lot of things after he fired me, but devil wasn't one of them. If you have an affair with your married boss, there's a price to pay. At least that's what I think. But I pay the price, not my child. Brill stepped back into the room and watched her as she ranted. I told them they were wrong. You're damn right they're wrong. Who do they think they are? The church thinks they can kill a baby. Brill shrugged. They had a contract on you, he said, as if that was explanation. He lived and worked in a world different from hers. Parallel in many ways, same streets, same sun up in the east and down in the west. But it was more a world of shadows, a periphery of civilization. He had often told himself that what he did made the world safer, at least if just for one person. And there was some truth to it. But he knew what he was. A killer. He had been for years, and the only redeeming quality he could find in it was he killed bad men. Worse men than him, he supposed, though perhaps he was just better at being bad than they were. He grew up watching westerns, and one of his favorite expressions was, "There's always a faster gun." That's why he tried not to advertise what he did, because it would draw the wrong attention. Even now, belly full, he felt like he'd spent too much time in LA. The money he was trying to collect to take on Shelby was like Don Quixote tilting at windmills. All he was going to do was get himself killed. Barack was too powerful. Almost as powerful as the church, he thought. And here he was standing up to the might of it. Not the church, he amended. The bad men inside its walls. Men who decided babies should die. And he would stand up to them no matter what, every time. Even if it made him the worst man. Heavy footsteps sounded in the hall outside the door. Jessie perked up. "That's the second or third time today," she said to him, and shut up as she saw his face. "Your neighbors?" "I don't have neighbors," he whispered and grabbed her off the chair. She scooped up her diaper bag and let him herd her into the bathroom stall in the corner of the room. "I thought you said I was safe," she hissed over the top of her baby's head. "You will be." He pressed against the back wall of the bathroom and popped out the wainscoting under the trim. A 4-foot-tall tunnel led through the wall and into the empty loft next door. "Go," he instructed. "The stairs are on the other side of the room. Take them down and wait for me at the door." "Hold it," she said, and dashed past him back into the living room. Jessie scooped up the baby cinch Brill had bought her and ran back toward the bathroom. The front door splintered open. Jack and Klein dropped in, covering each side, and peppered the wall behind her with bullets as she ran. Jessie screamed as she dropped to the floor, rolling to her back to protect her no-screaming child. Brill grabbed her by the shirt and slid her across the floor, shoved her into the tunnel. Jack and Klein duck around the corner and catch a quick glimpse of Brill as he stands, gun drawn, waiting. Jack ducked as 2 shots drilled through the corner where his head had just been. "On 3, he mouthed to Klein. "You roll across." "I'm not rolling across," Jack argued. "I rolled last time." Klein shook his head. "You better cover me," he grumbled. "I'll cover you," Jack promised. "On 3. Klein held up his fingers and counted off. 1, 2, 3. Jack stuck his gun around the corner and emptied the clip as Klein rolled across the entrance to spray and pray from a different direction. "The bathroom is empty." They moved forward, sent shots into the shower. "It's empty too." "Where did they go?" Jack asked. Brill led Jessie through a darkened doorway into a black alley. The light over the door was shattered, the streetlights missing on purpose. He made sure they stayed that way. The empty alley spilled into the next block over, from the entrance to his building. They walked together as he set the pace, and she cinched the baby in the carrier around her shoulders. "Where are we going?" She watched over her shoulder. "Church," he answered, and they hurried through the empty streets. Chapter 38. Claremont and Rano stepped out of the side of the church and locked the doors. "There are legends that once upon a time we kept the doors open all night," Claremont mused. "Don't believe everything you read." "That was a different world," Rano answered. Claremont double-checked the lock and passed his set of keys to the other priest. "Let yourself in," he said. "I'll pick up dinner." They parted at the bottom of the stairs, moving off in different directions on the twilight-dusted street. The street lamps popped on, creating circled pools of light bisected by black shadows of dark lines. Claremont stared up at his church for a moment, just a building, but with the stained glass glowing in the growing darkness, a beacon for those without hope. He sighed, stuck his hands in his pockets, and moved from one circle of light to the next, ignoring the tickle of apprehension each band of black he stepped through caused in his stomach. Something moved in the shadows ahead of him, some warning that he was not alone. He stopped in the middle of a circle and peered into the shadows. Brill and Jessie stepped into the next pool of light. The hitman watched the priest. "You," he breathed as he stared at the girl. Brill left the woman and her child in the light and moved into the shadow between them. His hand reached into the circle where the priest stood and grabbed him by the lapel. It jerked him into the shadows with a small cry, followed by the not quite silent sound of the city existing around them. Chapter 39. Rano let himself into Claremont's modest home. It was Spartan, as suited a parish priest, though he assumed that one in a city like Los Angeles would live in a much nicer place. A classic California craftsman style, a front porch that stretched across the front with 2 chairs and a wooden swing for sitting outside on cool LA evenings. The inside was plain and unadorned. A couch and chair bracketed the stone fireplace. A cross on one wall, a painting of Michelangelo's Madonna on the other. Rano moved from room to room, exploring and becoming more surprised at what he found. Each room held several Bibles, different versions, translations of the text. Each book was marked, worn, and tattered, as if studied to the point of falling apart. He lifted one and opened it. The text was highlighted, notations in the margins. The tiny script was difficult to make out with the meager light that leaked in from the front of the room, so Rano set it back down. He noticed a blinking red light on an answering machine and pressed the button. "Rano, my friend. I'm afraid I will have to miss dinner. Something has come up. I will be at one of my parishioners' cabins, Paul Daniels. The number is in my address book if you need to contact me. Pray for my safety and the safety of those around us." The message clicked shut, and Rano spent several minutes deciphering how to replay it. Claremont sounded different. Forced. Scripted. There was something of an edge in his voice, and it set off alarm bells in his brain. But why? That's the reason he wanted to listen again. He pressed play. There it was. The voice was forced, and there was a noise in the background, a baby whining and a woman cooing a lullaby. Rano opened the desk drawer and pulled out the simple binder. He flipped to the name and address Claremont mentioned. It was just as he described. Rano picked up the phone and dialed from memory. Klein answered on the second ring and listened. Jack saw the look on his face and waved off the young prostitute he had motioned to his side of the car. "We'll swing by and pick up you up," Klein finished and closed the phone. "You know all work and no play makes Jack a very pent-up boy," said Jack. "After," Klein promised. They pulled away from the curb and drove off into the night. Chapter 40. Jessie stepped out of the single bedroom in the rear of the cabin, holding Adam in her arms. Morning sunshine filtered through the dust-covered windows to highlight dancing motes in the golden light. She stepped into a sunbeam that bathed her infant in a glowing halo that made Claremont stop to catch his breath. "I've made coffee," he finally stuttered and showed her the point to prove his point. "Can't have it," she told the priest. "I'm nursing." "Thank you." She turned to Brill, who sat in the single chair beside the window, so he could take in the whole room, a wall at his back. "How did you sleep?" he checked on her. "Sorry," she apologized. "I think he's catching a cold." Claremont moved to the couch and handed her a blanket as she tucked the baby next to her breast to begin feeding him. Brill stood, stretched, and poured himself a cup of coffee. The cabin was cozy. A living room on one wall, the kitchen on the other leading to a walled-off bathroom, and a bedroom in the back. A spiral staircase led up to a loft, and a second set of bunk beds built into the arch of the ceiling. Brill sipped his coffee and stared through the windows. The cabin was surrounded by woods, but only a single road led through the trees, easy enough to watch. If someone decided to sneak through the forest, they would have a good view, a good shot through any of the multiple panes of glass. He didn't like it. Too open. Too exposed. But it worked for one night, and he planned to move them again today. Or solve the problem if the priest couldn't make headway. "You decide how to end this?" he asked. "It perplexes me," Claremont confessed. "I'm not sure who to contact. Since I only had a contract with you, I don't know who hired the others. Unless Rano, but he wouldn't know any killers." "You signed a contract to kill me." Jessie pouted from the couch. "It's my SOP." "SOP? Standard operating procedure," Claremont explained. "He won't work without one." "And you did this?" "Not at all," Claremont waved his hands. "I'm quite against it. I've just developed a familiarity with him over the past several months. I know who he works." "If it's your SOP, maybe I should contract you to protect me," she said to Brill. He took a sip of coffee and considered it. "How much do you have?" She dug in her pants pocket with one hand, balancing the baby with the other. "You won't take her money. You'll keep her safe because it's the right thing to do." Brill shrugged. He probably would. It was the right thing, but he had done the wrong thing so many times for the right reasons. He knew they were just quibbling about the gray area. No, he would do it for one reason alone. The woman made him feel something. He might blame it on almost dying again in a hospital almost a half-year ago. He could blame it on the kindness of the priest who fed him once and treated him like a stray animal brought in from the cold, more than once after that. Jessie ignored the priest and held out a crumpled $1 bill and 9 cents in change. "It's all I've got," she said. Brill took her money and slipped it in the pocket of his pants. "It's enough." He fished around for a scrap of paper, turned a receipt over and dug out a pen from a drawer. "Sign," he told her. She scribbled her name across the back, and he initialed under hers. "Is that it? This contract supersedes all previous contracts, making them null and void." "I feel much better," she smiled. He smiled back at her, then glared at the door. "Someone's coming." She didn't wait for an explanation, just hopped off the couch and went to the bedroom to fast-pack the diaper bag. Claremont peeked out of the window beside the front door. "I don't see anything." He stopped short as a car drove around a bend in the road and stopped facing the cabin. "I can't see who it is," said the priest. "But the owner is out of town." Brill kept his back to the wall and peered through the window. "Trouble," he stated and pushed the priest back. Klein parked the car and stared at the cabin. "I don't like it," said Jack. "They're in there," Rano answered from the back seat. "According to your buddy," Jack smirked but didn't take his eyes off the building. "Could be a trap." Klein shrugged. "He seemed the type. He seems like he's got a hard-on to kill you." "Kill you too." "He wants both of us dead," Jack agreed. "We have that in common. We want him dead too." Klein pointed to the woods. "Just trees on both sides," he said. "You know if it's like that in the back." "Just the address," explained Rano. "I have not been here before." Daylight assault, Jack thought out loud. We should have come before dawn. He would have seen the headlights. He's in there watching us now. Klein scooted down in the seat just a little. "Do you see him?" "It's what I would do." "We're accomplishing nothing sitting here," said Rano. He popped open the door. "Wait here, I will learn more. This guy thinks he's our boss." Jack muttered out of the side of his mouth to Klein. "Let him get shot first. Watch for muzzle flash." Rano took slow, deliberate steps toward the cabin. Claremont peeked through the side of the window. "What is he doing here?" He pushed past Brill, opened the door and stepped out on the porch before the man could stop him. "What are you doing here?" Blam. Rano dropped to the ground and crawled back to the car. Claremont flew backwards through the open door, knocking it back on its hinges to bounce off the wall. "What are you doing?" Rano screamed. Jack leaned on the open passenger door, smoking barrel aimed at the door. "Kill 'em all," he grinned. "Let God do the rest." He fired 4 more shots into the swinging door, then reloaded as Klein ran for the cabin, peppering shots into the shadowed interior as he ran. Brill sent 3 shots through the opening, then shoved the door closed with the toe of his boot, grabbed Claremont by the scruff of his shirt, and hauled him across the hardwood floor to the bedroom. "Down. Down," he screamed at Jessie. The baby wailed, startled by the pops and explosions. Brill hauled Claremont into the bedroom and rushed back to the door. He hit the couch with a shoulder and shoved it up against the entrance. It wasn't much of a barrier, and the cheap construction wouldn't do much to stop a bullet. But anyone coming through would have to climb over it, so it might buy time. Jack and Klein flanked the porch, guns aimed at the door. "Son of a bitch almost got me," Jack crowed. He reached up and ran a hand along the bloody gash that bisected his cheek, crimson liquid staining his shirt. "You all right?" Klein called out. "I just got this shirt, man." Rano crawled up next to Klein. "I could have gotten us in the door," he gasped as he hid next to the hired hitman. Now you tell us. He shoved the priest back and leaned over to pepper the door with a couple of shots. Jack lifted Claremont up in a fireman's carry and led Jesse to the back slider in the bedroom. He peeked through the glass, slid it open, and ducked his head in and out. When no one shot at him, he stepped out and motioned Jesse to follow. She tried to keep the baby quiet, using her finger to suckle, and whispered in its ear. Brill double-checked they had a clear shot and sent her running for the trees while he covered her. When she slipped into the shadows, he shuffled after her, lumbering under the weight of the priest who groaned and huffed on his shoulder. Klein motioned to Jack. One of us has to try it. He almost shot me. Klein glared. Almost doesn't count. I'm the one bleeding over here. Jack shouted back. Klein grumbled. But he got up, snuck onto the porch, and kicked in the door. He sent 4 shots into the opening and ducked inside. No hail of bullets greeted him, no surprise jumps. You dead? Jack called out. No. You. Jack jumped up on the porch and stepped into the living room. He slipped in a slick of blood that led to the bedroom door and the open slider on the back wall. I think they're gone, said Jack. You deduced that from the lack of shooting? Klein asked. Back door is open, Jack pointed. And they left a trail. Klein just shook his head. Sometimes sarcasm was lost on his partner. He saw the trail of blood that led into the woods, splashes of red on the brown grass. Jesse moved slow with the baby, watching her step in the slick leaves. It gave Brill a chance to keep up. He could carry an 80-pound ruck for hours, but the priest topped out 100 pounds more than that. The pressure on one side was hurting the old bullet wounds, the repaired muscles protesting under the weight and exertion. He'd gone soft in LA, he realized. Too much civilized living. If he lived past this mission, he was going to have to make some changes. Either get out of the only line of work he'd ever known, or get his body back into the shape it needed to be for what he did. Is he okay? Jesse gasped. Brill heard Claremont groan. Just keep going, he said. They still needed distance between them and the cabin. The killers would follow the trail they were leaving, and he didn't have many bullets left to stop them. It would be better to drop the priest. Better to drop the girl and kid, too. Just get going and survive, he thought. That was the easy thing to do. The simple thing. It would mean survival, something he was very good at. So what if one more man died? He had killed plenty. So what if another woman and her baby died? It happened 1,000 times a day in Africa. Millions if all the undeveloped countries in the world were counted. What did it matter adding to that count? It happened every day. He shook his head and kept moving forward. Maybe it did happen. Maybe it still would. The killers could catch up with them and finish the job. But Brill wasn't going to abandon anyone. Not now. Not this far. Not while he still had a little fight and weapons left. And when the bullets were gone, he could use his hands, his teeth. No, he would fight for this woman, her baby, and the man on his shoulder, and save them. No matter who he had to kill, to do it. Put me down, Claremont groaned as they reached the edge of a shallow creek. Brill leaned him against a tree. The priest sank down and leaned back. The wound in his abdomen was leaking. Brill could see intestines and stomach protruding, a shredded mess poking out of his skin. I think I'm dying. Claremont moved his hand away, and then put it back to stop the blood and fluid pumping out of him. You might live, Brill countered. He stared at the woods behind them, listening. That's 2 Hail Marys for lying. Sorry, Brill shrugged. What can I do to help? Jesse leaned over the priest. Brill shook his head. There was nothing to be done. If they got the priest to a hospital right now, even then it would be 50-50. It's all right, Claremont comforted them. You don't have to lie to me. I'm ready for what will happen. Brill glanced down at the man. He looked at peace. In pain, but at peace with the outcome. Tell God hello for me, he said. You believe? Claremont snuffled. You sound surprised, Brill answered. I am. I thought since you killed so easily, that your relationship with him was strained. Save your strength, Brill watched the woods. He still couldn't hear pursuit, but that didn't mean it wasn't back there. He thought about sending Jessie ahead, across the creek, but decided against it. If the men were flaking them, she might get caught alone. Better they stayed together for now. Will it help? Claremont asked. Brill shook his head. No. It won't be long now. I thought it would hurt more, Claremont grimaced. The nerves were dying. Brill didn't want to tell him that the acid leaking from his stomach was acting like an anesthesia of sorts, dulling the pain as the man died. Are you comfortable? Brill asked. For now I am, said Claremont. He shifted and grimaced. They're coming, he gasped. You should go. We're not leaving him, Jessie glared at them. Claremont patted her hand on his arm. I'm not alone. Out here in God's wonder, I feel him getting closer. You can go in good faith. She said we're not leaving, Brill told the man who had become his friend. But he heard them now. Footsteps in the woods, separated by distance. Not quite flanking, but coming on their position from two different directions. The men had spread out in the woods, one following the blood trail, the other some yards away, in sight, but far enough out to catch a different trail or come at them from another direction. An easy way to set up a crossfire. Brill glared at the woods. He hefted the pistol in his hands and considered for a moment going on a hunt. He could stop running and turn on the men chasing them. But that would mean leaving the girl and her baby alone. I'll stall them, Claremont said as if reading his mind. Go. Brill nodded. He reached down and helped Jessie up. We can't leave him, she pleaded in a whisper. Let's go, said Brill. Her look was breaking his heart, leaving his friend was adding to it. But the priest was right. He was dying, and if they waited for him to do it, the men chasing them would catch up. He didn't say those words. He just looked into her eyes, and Jessie nodded after a second. She swooped down and kissed Claremont on the cheek, then let Brill lead her across the creek and into the trees on the other side. They marched for a half a mile, and he could see a ribbon of blacktop shimmering through the trees. Jessie marched beside him, sniffing, tears leaking down her cheek, but she kept quiet, saving her breath for how fast they were moving. He stopped at the edge of the trees on the road and peered up and down the two lanes. Clear? She asked. Come on. He helped her down the embankment and up onto the road on the other side. She watches him watch the road, the trees, his head on a constant swivel. It makes her nervous. Where are we going? She asked. I'll find someplace safe. He didn't like playing defense. And he had to keep her in mind, her comfort, her level of ability. It was playing with a handicap, and it might cost him his life. He wanted to find a no-name hotel, book a room in the corner, and hide her in it. Then he could go stop them. The killers chasing them. The men who sent them. Stop them all, and make them regret putting this contract out on a woman and her child. Offense would be better. But right now, they just needed to keep moving to find those places. A car topped the ridge behind them. He reached for his gun and held it by his leg. Not them, he assured her out of the side of his mouth. But we can take the car. She put a hand on his arm and held him stay. Or we could try it this way. She stuck out her thumb in the universal sign of "Can I get a ride?" The car slowed down and rolled to a stop beside them. See, she said and reached for the back door. Up front, he told her. He opened the door and let her climb in, then settled in the back seat behind her. The driver was a kindly older man who smiled. "I didn't see your car broken down on the side of the road," he said. "Where you folks coming from?" "We were staying at a cabin," Brill tried a piece of the truth. "Left the headlights on so the car wouldn't start." "That's happened to me before," said the man. "Not a great way to start the day." He glanced in the rearview mirror. Brill pulled his coat closed across the blood-stained shirt and did a quick assessment to make sure no more was showing. No need to look like a serial killer to the nice man offering them a ride. Adam coughed in his mother's arms, a wet sound that made the infant squirm and fuss. "That doesn't sound good," said the driver. "No, it doesn't," Jessie agreed. They drove on in silence as she tended to the child. In the woods behind them, Rano and Jack stumbled across the body of Claremont as he leaned against the tree. He looked peaceful, his chest still as he gazed up at the heavens. "Dear God," Rano crossed himself. "Hazard of the trade," Jack said. He whistled, and Klein ran through the woods. The other killer emerged next to them a second later. "We're going to lose them," he said. They started across the creek. "We can't just leave him like this," Rano said as he stumbled after. "Just say we forced you to do it," said Jack. "Or stay here." Rano hesitated on the edge of the water for just a moment, then splashed after the two killers as they continued through the woods. They saw the empty road and pushed through the trees to reach it. Black asphalt stretched in either direction, empty, quiet. "Told you we'd lose them," Klein complained. "Back to the car." Jack turned around. "I'll call my superiors," Rano followed. "They'll point us in the right direction." Chapter 41. The driver pulled in front of a cinder-block motel, perched on the outskirts of town across the street from a convenience store. "I can take you to a mechanic or gas station," he protested. "This is fine," Brill said. "Thank you." Jessie thanked him too and waved as he drove off. She held her hand against Adam's forehead. "He's burning up," she shot Brill a fearful look, one he'd seen on the faces of other mothers in third-world countries. He nodded for her to follow and went in to ask the clerk for directions to a hospital. The pimply-faced teen directed them several blocks over, and they were standing outside of a tiny crowded with 8 people in front of them. "How long can we wait?" Jessie sounded worried. Brill studied a map of the building on the wall. "Children's ward on the 3rd floor," he said. "Come on." "We have to be admitted," she hissed as she trailed after him. "They won't let us up there." "I'll convince them," he assured her. They took the elevator to the 3rd floor. "Wait here," Brill said and left her as he went to the nurse's station. The lone nurse on duty shook her head as he began talking to her, then gave him a tired smile. She got up from behind the desk and came to Jessie. "Let's look, shall we?" The nurse led Jessie into an empty room. "Lay him on the bed and fill these out while we check on him," she instructed the girl and handed her a clipboard with forms on it. Brill slipped the nurse a couple of folded $100 bills that she pocketed. "Thank you," said Jessie as she scribbled on the documents. "I'll just send for his records and we'll set you up." She took Adam's temperature, ran his vitals, and took the forms from Jessie to enter into the computer back at the nurse's station. Brill leaned against the door and watched the nurse to see if she would pick up the phone and call security. She didn't. The woman sat in front of the computer and entered the information Jessie provided, then keyed in a medical record request. Chapter 42. Rano stood over the phone in Claremont's home. He reasoned the priest would no longer need it, and besides, it was church property. The 2 killers had dropped him there with instructions to call them as soon as he learned something. He had checked in with his superiors and now stood waiting on the phone to ring. He wasn't sure if it was that fast, but images of Claremont lying dead under the tree played in his mind, and he didn't want to move. Every Bible in the room reminded him of the dead man. It was an ignominious end for a man who had served the church well. Rano wondered if his fate would be the same. Dead and forgotten in the woods. The phone rang, and he picked it up. "Bishop," he said to the man on the other end of the line. "They are at a hospital," the voice told him. "Our hacker intercepted a computer request." "I understand," Rano answered. "Can you complete your duty?" "I can." "And the complications? Will they continue?" Rano sighed. "Claremont is no more," he told the bishop. That made the man pause. Rano imagined him genuflecting, and then just as fast dismissed it. The bishop was pious for cameras and when it served him, but he could not recall the man acting as a man of the cloth in private. The priest glanced around the simple room used by a simple priest, and contrasted it to the ostentatious display of wealth the bishop had in his apartment. He wondered for a moment if he was on the right side, if indeed the Lord would sanction the killing of a child, even if it was the devil's son. Claremont was distracted from purpose, Bishop Peter stated. He fell under the influence of the enemy and turned to a path of darkness. Rano almost argued. He was the last to speak with Claremont, at least of the church, and he knew the man was no more evil than the child who had yet to prove one way or the other that it was. "Can you do this?" the bishop asked again. Rano sighed. He could. His life was the church, and doing the work of that institution sometimes required sacrifice. On occasion, it was the lives of men spent in service. On this occasion, it was the life of a child. What did it matter? "I can," he answered. "Then fear no evil," the bishop advised and hung up. Rano used his finger to depress the button on the house line and dialed another number scribbled on a pad next to the phone. Klein answered on the second ring. "Yeah. We know where they are," Rano said. Klein watched Jack on the bed with a young hooker. He rode her from behind, his thick hands wrapped around her throat, as she bucked and fought in the throes of suffocation. "We'll pick you up in 10 minutes, Klein told him. He hung up the phone in the cheap hotel room, a no-tell they called it, and wiped down the phone with his sleeve. Jack finished with the twitching body and stumbled into the bathroom for a towel to wipe off with. "You finished?" Klein asked. Jack leaned against the doorjamb and sighed. "If you wanted a piece, you should have said something sooner," he answered. "Don't pout because you don't speak up." "Let's go get that son of a bitch." Klein stood up. Jack got dressed and hurried after him. Chapter 43. Brill sat in a chair facing the door. He didn't like his back to the window, but 3 floors up with no other tall buildings in sight gave him a small sense of comfort. He had read about a sniper making a shot from a mile away, but he figured he wasn't high enough on anyone's radar yet to warrant that kind of price tag. Maybe Shelby Johnson from Barack, but so far as that man knew, Brill was dead, shot in the desert by a woman hired to kill him on U.S. soil. Another contract. He planned to keep it that way. No one needed to know he was still breathing, so long as he planned his revenge against the man who made him a killer. He could stay under the radar for years, if necessary. Jesse opened the door with one hand and entered the room with a young, nebbish doctor. He had a stethoscope around his neck, curly hair, and a name tag that read Norman. No doctor in front of it, no initials behind it. Simple, unadorned Norman. It made him seem more approachable, and Brill supposed that was the idea. Remove a layer between doctor and patient. Norman nodded at Brill, picked up the chart and examined it. "He's going to be fine. We just want to keep him overnight for observation." "Thank you," said Jesse. Norman reached out and shook her hand. Brill thought he held on a second longer than necessary. "Have the nurse call me if you need anything." Norman left, and Jessie leaned over to kiss her baby on the forehead. "He's going to be fine," she sighed. "I heard." "I want some coffee," she told him. He nodded. "Can I have some money?" He fished out a couple of crumpled ones and passed them to her. Cream, no sugar, right? He nodded again, and she winked. It had been a long time since a woman had bothered to remember how he took his coffee. Brill watched her disappear through the door. He jumped up, grabbed the chart from the bin outside of the door where Norman had left it, and put it in an empty spot several rooms away. He sat back in the chair as Jessie returned, balancing 2 steaming cups in her hands. "It's hot," she told him. "But at least it's bad." He took one from her and blew the steam off the top. "Just how I like it." He sniffed it. "You think I'd poison you?" she smiled. "I would have put it in the red sauce. Harder to detect." He took a swallow and grimaced it down. "Awful, I told you," she giggled and sat in the chair beside the hospital bed. "Decaf's worse." They sat across from each other in the silent hospital room, sharing coffee and watching the baby sleep. Chapter 44. Klein pulled his car into a space marked ambulance only and dropped it in park. He jumped out of the driver's side and stalked toward the entrance to the hospital, Jack close on his heels. "Hey, asshole!" A smoking orderly stepped on his cigarette and moved to intercept them. "You can't park there." Jack pulled his silenced gun and popped the man in the face. He giggled as the body flopped over a row of hedges, mostly hidden from view. "Someone might miss him," Rano said as he fell in step beside the killers. "We won't be that long," said Klein. They marched toward the entrance to the ER. "You said that last time," Rano muttered. Jack almost shot him too, but there were too many people inside the door. Too many witnesses. He tucked his gun under his coat and thought about it though. They stood in front of the elevator and waited for it to descend. Upstairs, Brill stared at the door. Jessie stood up from her chair. "Be right back." She slipped into the closet-sized bathroom. He heard the elevator ding outside, watched the shadows of feet walk past the narrow slit of an opening at the bottom of the door. He heard a familiar sound. The soft whoosh pop of a silenced pistol as it sent a bullet into a body. Then the thud and thunk of that body hitting the floor. Brill jumped out of the chair and moved to the door, his pistol drawn. He cracked it open and peeked out. Jack stood over the dead duty nurse. Klein waited while Rano checked the charts in front of the doors. A janitor stepped through an adjoining hallway and stopped to stare at them. Jack put a bullet into her face and dragged the body away from the door. "Let's get this done," he said. "Here he is," Rano called out. Klein hurried down the hall and slipped into the empty room. Brill opened the door, just as Jessie stepped out of the bathroom. "What is it?" she asked. Jack heard her. So did Rano. The priest shouted. Jack raised his pistol. Brill was faster. A third eye popped open in the killer's forehead, sent him sprawling across the 2 bodies he had just killed. Klein popped out of the door. Brill shot at him, but the man ducked away, hiding in the empty room. Rano cowered and whimpered. Jessie grabbed the baby and wrapped it in the cinch. Brill moved her behind him, blocked her with his body as they made their way to the stairs. Rano muttered a prayer. "It is evil. He's just a kid. You have betrayed humanity. I'm trying to save it." Brill had met fundamentalists before, from all religions. None of them were right. But they were all sick. An illness that needed to be cured. He could trace a lot of evil to men who claimed to be doing it in the name of a god. At least he just killed for money. "What's going on?" Norman pushed through the stairwell door. Jessie caught it and herded him back. "I'm a man of the cloth," Rano said as Brill pointed his pistol at the man. "What's he doing with that gun?" Norman said. "Using it." Brill pulled the trigger twice and sent Rano sprawling. He hit the door and pulled it closed behind him. "Oh God," Norman stuttered. Brill shoved the pistol under the doctor's chin. "Don't." Jessie reached for his hand. "He's a witness," Brill growled. "I'm with her," said Norman. Don't kill me." "Those men were after my son," she explained to Norman. "They killed the nurse and someone else. We were just defending ourselves." Norman reached forward to check on Adam. "How is he?" "He's fine now." Brill led them down the stairs. "Don't kill him," Jesse begged again. "Where do you live?" "No way," said Norman. "I'm not taking you to my place. I can't. I'm on duty." Brill pointed the pistol again. "On the other hand," said the doctor, "would you like to come over?" Jesse nodded. "At least until we figure out our next step." "Sound good." "Dump the body." "Disappear," said Brill. "We're not going to kill the doctor," she said as they paused at the bottom of the stairs. "I promise." "Unless you make noise," said Brill. "If you try to attract attention, make a break for it. Anything other than walk us to your car, you're dead. Read me." Norman stared into the flat black eyes and shivered. "I read you." They opened the door. "I forgot my keys," said Norman. "We don't need them." They walked out of the crowded Brill heard the phone ring behind them and the nurse on duty call out, "Security." He reached for his gun, but the burly security guard ignored them. "They need you in peds," the nurse told him as the man rushed for the elevator. Chapter 45. Klein ducked in and out of the door, and when no one shot at him, he peeked around the edge. He saw the dead priest leaking on the tile floor, and pushed past him toward the door to the stairwell. He paused at the door, and stared at the still body of his partner in a pile on the floor. "Ah, Jack," he sighed. The door at the far end of the ward opened, and a nurse stepped through. She screamed and ran for the phone to call security. Klein stepped inside the stairwell and descended like he was a man who knew where he was going. He stepped into the as chaos broke loose. More security rushed through the doors, headed for the third floor. He stepped to one side and meandered toward the door, trying not to draw attention to himself. "Where's Dr. Norman?" the nurse on duty cried into the phone. "He's missing from peds." "I'll page him." She typed on the keyboard to pull up his number. Klein reversed direction and moved so he could see the screen as she turned back to the phone. He spied an address and repeated it as he left the He hopped in his car and pulled out as 4 police cruisers raced into the parking lot. "Good thing they didn't see his parking job," he muttered. "They might have given him a ticket." Chapter 46. Norman drove his conservative car at a conservative pace. Jessie sat in the passenger seat, cradling her baby and appreciating the slow speed he was taking as they made their way to his house. Brill sat behind him, pistol in his lap. The doctor was very aware of the man behind him and kept his eyes moving from the road to the rearview mirror and back again, hands locked on 10 and 2. He jumped. "What?" Jessie asked. "My beeper. It's the Are you an doctor?" Brill asked. Norman shook his head. "Not this rotation," said the young man. "They must have found me missing from peds." Jessie giggled. "That's funny." "What?" "You said they found you missing. It's just funny." Norman didn't laugh. "I thought it was funny," Brill told her. "Thanks," she said. "For a moment, I thought I was delirious." "You still might be," he told her. They had only had coffee since dinner the night before. He knew he needed fuel and suspected she did too. The doctor pulled into a nice home in a cul-de-sac in a decent neighborhood and parked outside of the garage. Brill leaned forward and tapped him on the collarbone with the pistol. "Do you normally park outside of the garage?" "All of the time." "Why don't you use it?" "It's full of my junk," the doctor confessed. "I don't want your neighbors to see anything out of the ordinary." "Well," said Norman, "I'm not usually home at this time." "We'll chance it," Brill told him. "Go." He motioned the doctor out of the car and waited for Jessie to climb out with Adam. They followed Norman to the back door. "You hotwired my car," said the doctor. "Can you hotwire my door lock?" Brill pushed past him and tested the door. A simple door lock, no deadbolt. An advantage of living in these places, he thought. Brill gripped the knob and shoved his hip against the door. It cracked the frame but opened. "Hey," Norman complained. "I had a key under the mat." Brill grabbed him and dragged him into the kitchen. Jesse followed. The room was an open floor plan, with the kitchen connected to the living room on one side of the house, the stairs leading up to the bedrooms on the other. A lone recliner sat in front of a giant television screen, boxes stacked against the walls. "I don't have many people over," the doctor explained. "I haven't finished unpacking." "How long have you lived here?" Jesse asked. 2 years. He ducked his head, ashamed. Brill moved him out of the way and checked the refrigerator for food. Jesse took his clue and began rooting through the cabinets. "There's 6-pack of craft beer on the shelf and a jar of mustard on the bottom." The cabinets were just as empty. "I eat out," Norman said. "A lot." Brill picked up a box out of a chair for Jesse to sit. "Hungry?" he checked. "Famished," she answered. "And Adam needs to eat." She leaned back, lifted her shirt, and began feeding him. Norman opened 2 drawers as he searched. "Let me get you a towel." He passed her one, and she used it to cover up. "Thank you." "I'm going to the store," Brill told her. He glared at Norman. "Nothing changes while I'm gone. No phones. Nothing." Norman bounced his head up and down. "I won't do anything." "Where is the closest store?" Norman told him. "You want anything special?" he asked Jesse. She flashes a smile and opened her mouth. "Besides ding-dongs." "Something good," she told him. "Protein." Brill pulled out his pistol. Norman tripped over a box, trying to get away from it. "Relax," said Brill. He passed the pistol to Jesse. "I'm not going to use that," she told him. "If he gets out of line or tries to use the phone, just pop him in the knee." "I'm not going to get out of line," Norman assured them. "I won't do it," Jesse stuck out her chin. "Humor me." "I don't believe in violence," she said. "Yet here we are." Norman leaned against the counter and watched them. Jesse wouldn't budge. Brill rounded on him. "She doesn't believe in violence, Doc, but I do. You've seen it." Norman nodded. "I want you to keep her safe, like I would. I want you to protect her and help her if she asks." "I promise," Norman gulped. It satisfied Brill. The man would do what he wanted. Most doctors were book smart, but lacked a lot of street knowledge. It made them good in a clinical setting, but utterly unprepared to deal with the realities of life. Norman seemed like a good kid. Brill didn't want to hurt him. But the doctor didn't need to know that. He needed to think Brill would visit great violence upon his person at the slightest provocation. Thinking that would keep him in line. Brill double-checked with Jesse, who gave him a nod. Then he moved through the door, yanking it closed behind him, and back to the car to make a supply run. Norman let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "Yikes," he said. "Is he really that bad?" "No, he's not that bad," Jesse answered. "That's what I thought. He's worse." Chapter 47. Brill strolled the aisles of the store like an old pro. His hunter style filled the cart in a quick, efficient fashion, and he moved to the only line to check out. He got behind an old woman with extra coupons and fought back an urge to just walk out with the groceries. Chapter 48. Jesse sat in the recliner with Adam, rocking him. Norman rearranged boxes, burning off nervous energy. "Can I put him down on a bed?" she asked. "It's upstairs," he said. She stood up and put the pistol in the waist of her pants. "I thought you told him no." The doctor stared at it. He left it anyway, she answered. You won't need it, he told her. I won't turn you in. It's not you I'm worried about, Norman. He led her upstairs. The master bedroom had a more lived-in look. Clothes on the floor in the corner, an unmade bed. No empty boxes. Do you have extra blankets? Jessie asked. He pulled some from the closet and handed them to her. She arranged a nest on the bed, a circle for the baby to sleep in. I worry about him falling off. No, it's good, he assured her. She looked at the master bath just through the door and a giant tub inside. Norman noticed her staring. You can use it if you want. It's been so long since I've had a bath, she said. I never use it, but it should work. Could I? He reached into the closet and handed her the plushest towel he had. Thank you, she teared up. Norman stared at her for a moment, then put a hand on her shoulder. Jessie sobbed once and leaned into him. The doctor held her for a moment, patting her on the back. Sorry, she pulled back and wiped her nose with the back of her hand. Don't be, he told her. It's been so much. No need to explain, he said. Don't want to be an accessory, she asked. Something like that. But it's not a problem. Just, relax. She sniffed another thank you. Clean clothes, he snapped his finger. He opened a drawer and pulled out a shirt and pair of sweatpants. They'll be big, but you can cinch them, he told her. I don't know what to say. Yeah. Don't say anything, he told her. Unless you need something. Then just yell. Or don't yell, you'll wake the baby. But call out for me. I'll be downstairs. Jessie leaned up and kissed him on the cheek. Norman blushed, then stumbled through the door. She checked on Adam, kissed his head, and tore out of her crusty clothes as she drew a steaming bath. Jessie slipped into the clear water and let the warmth relax her tired muscles, her head lolling to one side as she drifted into a hazy snooze. Chapter 49. Klein pulled his car to the side of the road and parked beside a tree. He counted off the addresses listed on the curb and saw the house he was looking for in the cul-de-sac. He got out of the car and walked up to it. The driveway was empty, but there were a couple of lights on inside. He checked the window beside the door, then noticed the door jamb was split. He twisted the door open and stepped inside, pistol leading the way. Norman stood up at the bottom of the stairs. Hey, he called out. Klein shot him. The doctor flipped over a stack of boxes and knocked them askew with a loud clatter. Jessie sat up in the bathtub. Norman, she said. Klein heard her and slipped up the stairs. Brill passed the car on the street and recognized it. He jammed the gas pedal to shoot the last 100 yards and slid to a stop in the driveway. The groceries were forgotten as he pelted toward the open door. Klein paused at the top of the stairs and saw the light leaking out from under the bedroom door. He turned the knob, stood to one side, and pushed the door open. All was quiet. He stepped into the room, saw the baby sleeping on the bed, and took aim. Jessie slammed into him, knocked him into the wall. The gun went off with a muffled pop. Klein grabbed her by the hair, spun her around, and slammed her into the wall. He raised his pistol to shoot her. Norman crashed into him, the two men flipping over the edge of the bed and bouncing on the floor. The baby began screaming. Klein rolled Norman underneath him, bashed him across the head with the butt of his pistol. Jessie kicked him, and he rolled with the hit, coming up on the other side of the bedroom. Brill raced up the stairs past a smear of blood on the wall. He hit the door and took it all in. Klein aiming at Jessie. Her standing there naked. The baby screaming. Norman on the floor. He leapt as Klein pulled the trigger. The bullet slammed into him. He huffed, his trajectory taking him on the side of the bed. He bounced off the floor and jumped up, blood leaking from his shoulder as he stood between Klein and the baby. The killer grinned and aimed at Brill. Holes popped open in his chest, slamming him back against the wall. Jesse emptied the remaining bullets in the clip into Klein until the pistol clicked dry. She dropped the gun and went to Adam. "Is he okay?" Brill let her check the baby. "I think that's my blood, not his," he said. He leaned over to check Norman as he swam in and out of consciousness. "You're going to have a goose egg," he told the doctor. "You're shot," Norman observed. "So are you," said Brill. "Oh yeah," Norman passed out. "Is he going to live?" Brill shrugged and sat on the edge of the bed before he took a cue from the doctor and did the same. "I'll get you a towel to stop the bleeding," Jessie said as she cradled Adam. "Get one for yourself too." She glanced down and blushed. "I didn't notice," she confessed. "I noticed enough for both of us." He leaned back on the bed and focused on breathing. "It's never going to stop," Jessie said as she tended his wound with one hand, the baby clutched in the other. "It's never going to be over. They're going to keep coming until they kill my baby." Brill reached up and held her hand against his shoulder. "I'm going to stop it." "How can you say that?" she said, tears streaming down her face. He knew it was the adrenaline. He knew the shakes would come next. It was a pattern people went through when exposed to extreme circumstances. She needed to eat too. So did he. "And get the doctor to patch him up." "It's in my contract," he told her. "You and your damn contracts." Chapter 50. Klein's car pulled to a stop outside the perimeter set up by the Norman climbed out of the back seat and leaned in. "I could do a better job on that here," he said. Brill patted the white bandage on his shoulder. "Best field dressing I've ever had," he told the young man. "You do good work. Get your head looked at." He nodded. "I can get more cash," he offered. "This works," said Brill as he patted the wad in his borrowed shirt pocket. "Thank you," Jessie said from the passenger seat. "I don't know what else I can do," the doctor confessed. "But I want to help." "You have," said Brill. Norman shut the door and watched them drive off. He wasn't sure what he was going to say to the police yet. Nothing about Brill and Jessie, though they would be on security cameras. Nothing about the dead man in the trunk of the stolen car he had just left, though that wasn't on video anywhere. He thought for a moment about calling a cab and just going home, but he didn't want to clean up that mess yet. Instead, he decided to go inside and get his head checked, just as Brill advised. It seemed like a sensible move. He could figure out what was next after that. Chapter 51. Brill took the car to the address listed on the dead man's driver's license. Klein was in the trunk, but his car wouldn't attract attention until the body started stinking. Brill figured they could hide out there and recover for a few days, until he could solve the problem and close the contract with Jessie. It was a townhouse in a nice section of Los Angeles, on the edge of Santa Monica. They had to park on the street so the car couldn't stay long, but no one bothered them as they went inside. Klein had good taste in decor. 2 leather sofas in front of a whitewashed fireplace, a framed piece of art instead of a television. A pair of master suites upstairs, one closet full of men's clothes, the other empty. It took Brill 10 minutes to find the gun safe. It took him 15 more to find the hidden cash. "That's more money than I've seen in my whole life." Jessie stared at the pile of cash on the table between them. It was a couple $100,000. Brill had seen more, but it was still impressive. He pulled out $30,000. "This is for services," he told her. "Half," she argued. He shook his head. Half would have been good, enough to finance his quest against Barack. But he was wounded again. Too soon to take up that fight. He needed time to recover, time to heal and plan. And he wanted to get away from killing for just a little while. "You can use this," he said. "Get settled. Get back on your feet, get him set up." He nodded toward Adam, as the baby slept in a nest on one of the sofas. "What about you?" she argued. It was half-hearted, and they both knew it. "This will last me a year," he lied. "Besides, I can make more. More contracts." He shook his head. "I'm done with that for a while," he told her. "Just one more and I'm done." "Mine." He nodded. It was a sobering thought. There were still men out there who wanted to kill her child. He was going to stop them. But first he had to find them. "You can live here for 3 weeks, maybe longer," he told her. "Leave when they cut the electric." "What about she glanced at the door. "Body?" "They won't find it," he assured her. "Not for a long time." That was explanation enough for her. "When will you go?" "Tonight. I want to shower first." "Okay," she said in a sad voice. He didn't have an answer for that. He was sad too, but he wasn't sure if it was for the same reason. Jessie went to the sofa and lifted Adam up. She took him upstairs and settled him in a large protective nest in the master bed. "Are you coming?" she called down to Brill. She met him at the top of the stairs and led him into the shower. He let her turn on the water, let her undress him, and when she joined him, he let that happen too. They stayed in until the water turned cold. Chapter 52. He took Klein's car to a junkyard, broke in, and crushed it in a compactor. The hunk of metal leaked radiator fluid, oil, and gas into the hard-packed California dirt, and if some of it was blood, no one could tell. It was a short walk to a cheap car lot where he bought a van for cash and parked it outside of a home improvement store. It wasn't anything special, but he turned it into a car camping boutique, just a bed, some camp chairs, a bucket, and water. He could add more kit later, but with supplies, it would be an off-the-grid home no one could find. By noon, he was in front of Claremont's church. The cathedral made him sad, missing his friend, but that didn't stop him from breaking into the priest's office. He wasn't sure what he would find. Certainly not a smoking gun that solved the whodunit when it came to hiring killers. But there was a handwritten note in one of the Bibles. It read like an org chart and a confession that directed him up the chain to the bishop. Not a cardinal, not the archbishop, though those men may be involved. But Brill found his messenger. Now he just needed to send the message. Chapter 53. He knew a guy who could help. There was more than one problem to solve. The first was simple. Stop the men trying to kill Jessie. The second was a little more complicated. She had the funds to start a new life, but that same new life needed an identity. In case more men came looking. When he first came to LA, out of the hospital and shot up, he needed an ID. He drove around in a stolen gangbanger's car until he found the right kind of place, and it took 3 more tries before he found the right kind of guy. The kind that didn't give him a side look when he asked about papers. A guy who knew what he was asking about. The driver's license was expensive. He had the cash to cover it then, though it knocked his stash down to almost nil. He had more cash now. And a simple picture from her wallet. 6 hours, the guy told him. Maybe 8. Ink-stained fingers working in a combination print copy shop. A place people stopped off on their way to Homeland to get passport photos. Nothing to indicate the under-table work that went on in the back. "You want something for you?" the guy asked. He had a slight Iranian accent, but mixed features. Student dad and a cheerleader mom. Dad went back to Iran when he was a teen. Brill had checked up on him. "Mine's still clean," he told him. Assad nodded. "I can expand the profile," he offered. Trying to upsell. Brill shook his head and glanced at the clock on the wall. 7 hours, he said. That would leave a couple of more hours of daylight before dark. He had an appointment after dark. Brill left the man to his task. He didn't notice the delicate fingers pick up a stain-smeared phone from the counter and press a button. Didn't see the man speak into the receiver. Chapter 54. A black Suburban piqued his interest. Brill stopped at the corner and ducked into a doorway. He pretended to window shop, but used the reflection in the glass to study the street. The truck was as common to government agents in America as a pickup was to rebels in Africa. Spend enough time knowing what to look for, and it's easy to spot. The truck rode low on suspension, meant it was heavy. Armored. Probably light armor, but not civilian issue. It also told him there were bodies inside, a lot of weight added to the back. Plus, he was just a practicing paranoid by nature, so even if it was a civilian playing around with a black truck designed to look official, it was better to play it safe. The problem was, he didn't have time to play safe. He had time to get the papers and get the contract done. But the truck bothered him. Had the guy ratted him out? It was possible. There would be no reason for a bolo on him in the narrow circles of the underworld. But something could have popped. Maybe it was the second trip to the guy. Maybe it was nothing. He waited 5 minutes, until the guy inside behind the counter came to the door he was looking through and cracked it open. "Help you, Jack?" "Name's not Jack." "Whatever, man. Could you just keep moving or come on in? Don't block the door." The interaction didn't draw any reaction from the truck. That was a good sign. He was just being paranoid. Some LA soccer mom had parked in front of the copy shop to hit the dry cleaners next door. Probably. He shifted his hands, slipped the pistol from his waist, and stuck it in the pockets of his pants. It looked awkward, but gave him a faster draw. Just a lift, point, and shoot, instead of trying to yank it out. He crossed the street and passed the truck, studying it from the corner of his eye. No one in the driver or passenger seat. Too shadowed in the back to see anything, windows too tinted. He glanced into the copy shop. The guy was behind the counter, looking down. Looked like he was working. Brill took a breath. If he looked hard enough, everything looked suspicious. Sedans could be alphabet agencies working undercover. Bums, drug dealers, anyone really. Still no sign of a soccer mom, but no sign of a wet work team waiting either. He hit the corner of the block, crossed over and hugged the wall as he approached the big black SUV. Couldn't see into the back, but it looked empty. Sitting low due to cargo. Was it just a lowered lift kit, or crappy suspension and shocks? Body was washed and waxed, so someone took care of it. Civilian tags, though any undercover agency worth its salt wouldn't be dumb enough to put Blue G-Man tags on a vehicle. Brill stepped through the door and moved to one side while the man behind the counter watched him. The hitman didn't like it. Glass door, glass window. He felt exposed. The back of his neck itched, as if he was in the crosshairs from a sniper on a roof on the other side of the street. That's how he would do it. Set up and wait. Peg him in the building. People would wonder about the shattered glass, come to investigate, and it would buy time for the shooter to escape. He shifted further right. "You're early," the forger told him. "Are they ready?" Brill moved to the left. The man behind the counter patted a folder under his hand. 3 taps. Not 1. Not 2. 3. The curtain that separated the front from the back swirled. Brill twirled, ripped his pistol out, and sent 3 shots through the thin linen. A body fell forward. Pistol clattered on the linoleum. Brill dodged, kept moving across the room as 2 bodies shoved out into the narrow front office and tracked him with the barrels of their weapons. Brill shot first. Nailed them both. Sent another shot into the forger. Sent him sprawling back in a splatter of gore and slick crimson. He cocked back the empty pistol and sent it through the billowing curtain like a baseball. It bounced off someone with a thud, their forward momentum colliding with the hunk of metal in a painful, wet-sounding plop. Brill slid on his knees to one of the fallen bodies, jerked up a pistol, and fired into the curtain again. He grabbed another with his other hand, aimed toward the door, and waited. He heard fabric on floor, a slurping, sucking sound just on the other side of the curtain. He stood up, ripped it down, and aimed the pistol around the edge of the opening. 2 more dead men inside, caught as they were trying to assault through the door. A 5th man lay on the floor, a chest wound making the sound Brill heard. He knelt beside him. Hurt. He tucked a pistol under his leg, searched the fallen man's pockets. Yeah. Didn't think I'd get hit through the wall. I was aiming for the curtain. The man gasped. Yeah, maybe. That, too. Could take you 10 minutes to die, Brill said. His pockets were empty, except for a couple of magazines for the pistol. He tucked those away. Just you 5, the hitman watched the door. More. Coming. Brill nodded. He had to get out, get gone. Sirens were sounding in the distance, getting closer to. Tell me who sent you, and I'll make the pain disappear. The man tried to shake his head. Brill tucked the pistol barrel in the hole in his chest and pressed. The would-be killer tried to scream. It came out a weak wheeze. Shelby? Brill asked. Barack? The man shook his head, but the tight skin around his eyes crinkled just a little. Answer enough for Brill. The forger sold him out. He didn't know why, but his instincts were spot on. Something felt off, and it was. He tucked the pistol into the temple of the dying man and ended his suffering. Then he checked the folder the forger had tapped. The man had turned him in, but he had finished the work. Couldn't say he wasn't a professional. He stuck it all in the waistband of his pants, grabbed 2 more pistols, and left by the back door, using his shirt sleeve on the handle. Chapter 55. He tried to hide. A year in Los Angeles doing low-level wet work didn't make him rich. It didn't make him happy, didn't move him closer to revenge. And now he was on the radar. The kill squad was Shelby's work. Barack operators had a certain stink. And Mo, he was too familiar with. It was time to go. If he stayed, Jesse would get caught in the crossfire. That would void their contract. He just had one stop to make before he ghosted. The bishop's residence was in a gated community in Bel Air. Brill parked the van several blocks away and jogged in, tailgating through the wrought iron gate with a resident. He moved from shadow to shadow, dark clothes blending in with the night. He saw a security guard in Prius, playing on his phone. Young, maybe 19. When he was 19, he had been at war for a country not his own. Had he ever been that young? He left the boy to his game and found the address he was searching for. The windows were dark. No soft glows in the corner to indicate a hall light. He circled the large stucco structure, listening for dogs, watching for obstructions that could trip him up or cause noise. It would be easy to just kill him. But that wouldn't stop the hunt for Jesse. No, he needed to send a message instead. There were no alarm signs outside the windows. He wondered about the church, how it could spend millions on a property like this for one man, and not protect it. He could have used more time to study patterns and routines, to learn how the bishop lived, to discover what made him afraid of dying. Time was a resource he didn't have, which meant he'd play it fast and loose, the way he liked it. There was an alarm wire. He saw the line running from the rear door. It took him 3 minutes to disarm it. 2 minutes more to gain entry. He followed the sound of snoring to a bedroom on the 2nd floor. A man slept in a California king-size bed, alone. Brill perched on the edge of the mattress and tapped him on the chest. The man bolted up and shoved back against the cloth-covered headboard. "Who are you?" he started to say. Brill chopped his knuckles against the skin over his eyebrow, bounced his head off the headboard. "Quiet," the hitman warned him. Peter gripped his aching skin and started to sputter. Brill slammed his fist into the man's crotch. The bishop mewled and tried to roll away. Brill grabbed him by the ankle, yanked him off the bed, and dropped him on the floor. Peter struggled to breath, cupping his crushed testicles in both hands, tears spewing from his eyes. Brill let him recover for a moment, let the pain subside into a just tolerable level. Then he kicked him in the stomach. The man curled up in a fetal ball, gasping, groaning as he fought for air. Brill dropped a knee into the exposed kidney, then dragged him across the room toward the master bath. He picked the man up, dumped him in the bathtub, twisted on the H-knob. He grabbed the bishop by the hair, held his upturned face under the running water. Peter bucked. He tried to twist, grabbed Brill by the wrist, yanked, kicked. Nothing worked. Water ran up his nose, in his mouth, blocking the scream he couldn't make from a bruised diaphragm. After 5 minutes, Brill hauled him out of the tub and threw him into the hard porcelain toilet, cracking the bowl and flooding the hard-tiled bathroom floor. He stood over the bishop and let him recover. "Why?" the man coughed between busted lips. "Why?" Brill bent down in front of him, grabbed a bare toe, and twisted until it snapped. Peter screamed. "I want you to remember," said Brill. He grabbed a second toe, jerked until it snapped, and let the scream die down again. "I need you to remember." Peter squirmed, trying to escape, but the wall blocked him, the broken toilet slicing into the skin on his leg as he twitched away. Brill grabbed a third toe. "Look at me." Peter tried to hold his head up. "You sent a message to a priest, Claremont." He saw recognition dawn in the bishop's eyes through the tears. "Claremont is dead," Brill told him. "So is the other one. And the men you sent after her." Peter shivered and started to protest. Brill snapped a third toe and waited. The tears flowed from the man on the floor, blood leaking from his broken body into the spray from the broken water lines. "I want you to remember," Brill told him again. "I'm her guardian angel." He grabbed the foot and lifted. Peter begged. "I can find you," Brill said. "I can make this worse. And no one can stop me. Please. Stop looking for her." He dragged the bishop out of the bathroom and lifted him against the bedroom wall. The man could only stand on one foot. "I can make you suffer," said Brill, and pulled a pistol from his waist. He pressed it against the bishop, pushing back until there was no more resistance, and the man couldn't breathe again. "It doesn't matter what you do, where you hide. Call it off or I find you." He waited again while the man snuffled through tears and nodded his head. "Make the call." He shoved Peter into the nightstand next to the bed, knocking the phone, clock, and a stack of books onto the rug-covered hardwood floor. "It's me," he blubbered. "It's done. I won't hurt her. Who else knows? Who's in your chain of command?" Brill squatted in front of the man again. "Just me. I made the call," Peter sobbed. "The priests knew, and me. No one else." He might be lying. Most people had a tell, the way they held their eyes, a crinkle in the lines on their face. But it was too dark to tell, and the damage from the beating would make it all the harder. Brill took a chance. He shot the man in the face. If he was telling the truth, Jessie would be safe. If others knew, they would have a hard time finding her in the new identity. He left the house by the back door and slipped through the darkness back to his van. There was just one more connection to break from her LA life. The men hunting her would stop. But the men hunting him would not. Until he paid them a visit, too. Chapter 56. Jessie saw a large yellow envelope slip under the door to the townhouse in Santa Monica. By the time she made it to the door and opened it to look, the walk was empty. The street beyond was quiet. She shut the door, locked it, and opened the envelope. A new passport fell out, along with a driver's license, a social security card, and a birth certificate for Adam. A handwritten note was stuffed in the blue passport book. Get out of LA. No goodbye. No see you later. She wondered if she would be haunted and hunted no matter where she ended up. But LA had nothing for her anymore, and now she had money and a new name. Later, she would decide where to go. A small town in the middle of nowhere, a good place to raise her son. Quiet. Simple. Hard to find. But first, she went to the kitchen and grabbed the last ding-dong from a package. She didn't want to make any tough decisions on an empty stomach, and besides, the classic delicious cake would help with the little bit of heartache she was feeling. She missed her guardian angel. Chapter 57. The van was perfect. Bed in the back, built up over storage space. He stopped and grabbed a couple of paperbacks from a used bookstore and running shoes from a sports store. His shoulder hurt from the exertion with the priest. His body ached. He drove with one hand on the wheel and thought about turning on the radio, searching for music he might remember, but kept it silent. The roar of the wheels on pavement song enough for now. He needed to hunt. Needed to stop the man who was trying to kill him. But recovery first. Time to hide and heal again. He pointed the van north, headed toward mountains at the top of the middle of the United States. He'd picked the name because he had never been. But it resonated within him. He killed bad men. Where better to hide than in the Badlands? Simple language for a simple man. He looked in the rearview mirror at the bed, camp chair and running gear in the back. His life would be simple too, for a little while at least. Run. Eat. Sleep. Repeat. Simple. The end.